The sound of breaking glass cut through the usual Friday night rumble of Route 66 bar and grill. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The jukebox playing Creedence Clearwater Revival seemed to fade as all eyes turned toward the commotion at the far end of the bar. Two men, one in an oil-stained trucker cap, the other sporting a leather vest with faded military patches, stood nose to nose, their voices rising with each exchange. A third man, clearly drunk, had just knocked over a row of whiskey glasses while trying to join the argument. Behind the bar stood Elena Walsh, her weathered hands gripping the scarred wooden counter. At 48, she carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. Her dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the lines around her eyes told stories of both laughter and loss. "That's enough," she said, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. The men either didn't hear or chose to ignore her. The argument escalated. A punch was thrown. Chairs scraped against the hardwood floor as patrons scrambled to clear the area. Elena reached beneath the bar and pulled out a Remington 870 shotgun, worn from years of handling but meticulously maintained. She pumped it once, the mechanical sound slicing through the chaos like a knife, then aimed at the ceiling and fired. The blast was deafening. Plaster dust floated down like snow. Silence fell instantly across the room. Every head turned toward her. "In case you gentlemen have forgotten," she said, lowering the shotgun to rest its barrel on the bar top. "In my establishment, we solve problems like actual men, straight to the face, and honest to God." The two main combatants stepped away from each other, suddenly finding the floor fascinating. Elena fixed them with a gaze that had made hardened veterans squirm. "Rick, you've had enough for tonight. Bill will drive you home." She nodded toward a gray-haired man sitting at the end of the bar. "And you, Donovan, your tab's on the house, but I need you to cool off outside for 15 minutes. Neither man argued. They knew better. As they filed out, the usual hum of conversation gradually returned. The jukebox, seemingly sensing the moment had passed, increased in volume as Lynyrd Skynyrd's Simple Man began to play. What the patrons of Route 66 didn't know, what most people in Pine Ridge, Arizona didn't know, was that the woman who had just diffused a potentially violent situation with nothing more than a warning shot and firm words had once stared down threats far more dangerous than rowdy drinkers. Elena Walsh had testified against members of organized crime and lived to tell about it. She had buried a husband who died serving his country. She had rebuilt a life from the ashes of tragedy, and soon she would face the greatest challenge of all. Route 66 wasn't just a bar, it was a living museum of Americana. License plates from all 50 states lined the walls, interspersed with vintage motorcycle parts, neon signs, and framed photographs of military units spanning conflicts from Vietnam to Desert Storm. The long, polished bar was crafted from reclaimed wood taken from an old Navy ship, and the tables, each one different, had been collected by Elena over the years from closing establishments across the Southwest. The pride of the place, however, hung above the bar Jack Walsh's naval dress uniform, preserved in a custom-built display case alongside his medals, and a faded photograph of a younger, smiling Jack standing beside his prized 1989 Harley-Davidson Softail, the same motorcycle Elena still rode every day. The bar had been Jack's dream. After serving 20 years as a Navy SEAL, he had planned to retire and open a place where veterans could gather, where stories could be shared, where the brotherhood forged in combat could continue in peace. He had found the perfect location, an abandoned gas station on the edge of Pine Ridge, just 15 miles from Fort Huachuca Military Base. He had drawn up plans, started renovations. Then came Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Jack was called for one final mission. He never returned. The official report said, "Accident during operations." A training exercise gone wrong. A mechanical failure. The details were classified, the explanation vague. Elena received a folded flag, heartfelt condolences, and an honorable mention at a ceremony she barely remembered through tears. Grief nearly consumed her, but 6 months after Jack's funeral, Elena found herself staring at his blueprints for the bar. In that moment, something shifted inside her. She would build his dream. She would create the place he had envisioned. It took 3 years of permits, loans, construction delays, and setbacks. But in 1995, Route 66 Bar and Grill opened its doors. In the decades since, it had become more than just a successful business. It was the beating heart of the community, especially for military personnel and the tight-knit motorcycle clubs that roamed the Arizona highways. And Elena, she had become something of a legend herself. The way she rode that old softail, still maintained in perfect condition through desert storms and blistering heat. The way she handled rowdy patrons with a mix of tough love and genuine care. The annual charity rides she organized for families of fallen soldiers. The way she could drink most men under the table while remaining clear-eyed enough to make sure everyone got home safe. What most didn't see was the woman who still woke up reaching for a husband no longer there. The woman who kept Jack's dog tags in her pocket every day. The woman who had built a life around preserving a legacy while wondering if she would ever create one truly her own. The stranger first appeared on a Tuesday evening in late October, when the desert air had finally shed the punishing heat of summer and settled into the golden warmth of autumn. Elena noticed him the moment he walked in. Not because there was anything particularly remarkable about his appearance: medium height, athletic build, close-cropped hair, showing the first hints of gray at 30-something, but because of how he entered. Veterans developed a certain way of moving through the world, especially those who had seen combat. They entered rooms differently, eyes scanning corners, noting exits, assessing potential threats. This man's gaze swept the bar in precisely that pattern before he selected a seat with his back to the wall, facing both the main entrance and the rear exit. He ordered a single beer and nursed it slowly, his eyes constantly monitoring the room. Elena had seen enough troubled soldiers to recognize the signs: the hypervigilance, the controlled breathing, the way he occasionally seemed to be listening to something others couldn't hear. Whatever this man had experienced had followed him home. She placed a glass of water alongside his barely touched beer. "First rounds on the house for military," she said. "Active or retired?" The man looked up, momentarily surprised at being engaged directly. His eyes, a deep brown that had seen too much, assessed her briefly before he nodded. "Appreciate it. Michael Cooper, recently discharged." He didn't offer a handshake, and Elena didn't push for one. "Elena Walsh, this is my place." She nodded toward his jacket, standard issue Army, but with the patches removed. "Afghanistan or Iraq?" "Both. Mostly Afghanistan, Special Services." Elena nodded, recognizing the brevity of someone not ready to share war stories. "My husband was a SEAL. Died during Desert Storm." Something flickered in Michael's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or shared understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that. It was a long time ago." She gestured toward the military memorabilia on the walls. "That's why this place exists. Jack's dream. I just built it for him." Michael's gaze traveled to the uniform above the bar, lingering on the trident insignia of the SEALs. "He would be proud," he said simply. It wasn't much of a conversation, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, Michael became a regular, always arriving at odd hours, always choosing the same corner seat, always nursing 1 or 2 beers over several hours. He rarely engaged with other patrons, but Elena noticed how he would sometimes listen intently to the veterans who gathered to share stories, especially the older Vietnam vets who came in on Thursday nights. Gradually, she learned fragments of his story. 10 years in Special Forces, 4 tours in Afghanistan, classified operations that had taken him to places he couldn't name, doing things he wouldn't discuss. He had been stateside for 6 months, but still jumped at sudden noises and slept only in short bursts. Elena recognized the pattern. Jack had been the same after particularly difficult deployments. The nightmares, the hyper-awareness, the struggle to adjust to civilian routines. She didn't press Michael for details, but made sure his corner remained available, and occasionally sent over a plate of food when it was clear he had forgotten to eat. It was a dance familiar to those who dealt with combat veterans, offering support without intrusion, presence without pressure, understanding without forcing conversation. Elena had performed this dance many times over the years. It was part of what made Route 66 different from other bars. Here, silence was respected, ghosts were acknowledged, and healing happened at its own pace. What she didn't know was that Michael Cooper had chosen her bar for reasons beyond the military connection. He was hunting for answers, answers that would soon shatter the careful peace Elena had built for herself. "So this is the famous Route 66 I've heard so much about." The voice, cultured, confident, out of place, among the regular crowd, cut through the Thursday night chatter 3 weeks after Michael's first appearance. Elena looked up from mixing a whiskey sour to see a man in his mid-50s standing at the bar. His tailored suit probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. His watch, a Rolex Submariner, gleamed under the bar lights. His smile revealed professionally whitened teeth and absolutely no warmth. "Depends on who's asking," Elena replied, sliding the completed drink to its waiting customer before wiping her hands on a bar towel. "James Mercer." He extended a manicured hand, CEO of Ascendant Properties. Elena didn't take the offered hand. "We're not for sale, Mr. Mercer. Save yourself the pitch." Mercer's smile didn't falter, but something hardened in his eyes. "You haven't heard my offer yet, Ms. Walsh." "It's Mrs. Walsh, and I don't need to hear it." She gestured around the bar. "This isn't just real estate. These walls hold 30 years of memories. Not everything has a price tag." "Everything has a price tag, Mrs. Walsh." Mercer placed a business card on the counter. "My company is developing the entire commercial district into a modern entertainment and shopping complex. Your establishment is the last holdout. I'm prepared to offer significantly above market value." Elena glanced at the card, but made no move to pick it up. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Michael Cooper watching the exchange intently from his usual spot. "The answer is still no," she said. "Now can I get you a drink, or are you just here to waste my time?" Mercer's false charm evaporated. "People like you don't understand how the modern world works. Progress happens whether you participate or not. The smart ones get ahead of the wave and profit from change. The stubborn ones—" He shrugged. "They get washed away." "Is that a threat, Mr. Mercer?" "It's reality. My offer stands for 48 hours. After that, things become complicated." He straightened his already perfect tie. "For instance, I understand your building inspection is coming up. Safety regulations have become so stringent lately. Fire codes, structural integrity, health department standards. It would be a shame if violations were found." Elena had dealt with intimidation before. During her early days running the bar alone, plenty of men had tried to pressure or frighten her, assuming a widow would be an easy target. They had all learned otherwise. "Let me make something clear," she said, leaning forward slightly. "This bar has been here for nearly 3 decades. It'll be here long after your fancy development plans fall through. And if you're thinking about playing dirty, remember that the sheriff, the fire chief, and half the county commissioners have been coming here since before you bought that overpriced watch. Now, unless you want a drink, I suggest you find the exit." Several regular patrons, including 2 massive bikers and an off-duty military police officer, had casually moved closer during the exchange. Mercer took note of the shifting atmosphere and adjusted his approach. "Think about it, Mrs. Walsh. This is a generous offer for a quaint establishment that's clearly past its prime." The military base is downsizing. The glory days of Route 66 are behind us. Nostalgia doesn't pay bills. He placed an envelope beside the business card. My formal offer. Feel free to have your lawyer review it. I look forward to your call. With a curt nod, he turned and left the leather soles of his Italian shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. Elena waited until the door closed behind him before picking up the envelope and card. She studied them briefly, then walked over to the ancient wood stove that kept the bar warm during desert winter nights. She opened the iron door, tossed both items in, and watched as they curled and blackened in the flames. A cheer went up from the regulars who had witnessed the exchange. "That's our Elena!" called out Ray Blackwood, a 70-year-old former Vietnam pilot who had been coming to Route 66 since opening day. Telling it like it is. Elena forced a smile, but unease settled in her stomach. Men like Mercer didn't give up easily. And they rarely played fair. She had weathered business challenges before, but something about Mercer's confidence troubled her. He spoke like someone accustomed to getting his way by any means necessary. From his corner, Michael Cooper watched everything, his expression unreadable. When Elena's gaze met his, he gave a small nod of what might have been approval or perhaps warning. Then he returned to his beer, seemingly lost in thought. Neither of them knew that Mercer's visit had set in motion events that would resurrect ghosts from the past and force long-buried secrets into the harsh light of day. The bar had emptied hours ago. Elena moved through her closing routine with practiced efficiency, wiping down tables, restocking the cooler, balancing the register. The rhythmic tasks usually brought a sense of satisfaction, the quiet aftermath of a busy night, allowing her to decompress. Tonight, however, her mind kept returning to Mercer's thinly veiled threats. Development pressure wasn't new in Pine Ridge. The town's location just far enough from Tucson to maintain its character, but close enough for commuters had made it a target for expansion for years. But most developers had respected the town's desire to preserve its heritage. Ascendant Properties was different. They had already bought out 3 businesses along Main Street, including Rodriguez's Hardware, a family-owned shop that had operated for over 50 years. The rumor was that Jorge Rodriguez hadn't wanted to sell but suddenly changed his mind after his son's contracting license encountered unexpected regulatory issues. Elena was wiping down the bar when she realized she wasn't alone. Michael Cooper still sat in his corner nursing what had to be a warm beer by now. "We closed 20 minutes ago," she called out. "Must have missed you during last call." Michael looked up, seeming to return from some distant thought. "Sorry, got lost in my head. I can head out." "Finish your beer," Elena said, continuing her cleaning. "No rush." Silence stretched between them, comfortable in the way it often is between people accustomed to their own thoughts. Finally, Michael spoke. "That man who came in earlier, Mercer. You should be careful." Elena paused her wiping. "You know him?" "Not personally, but I know his company Ascendant Properties, and I definitely know their security division Nexus." Something in his tone caught Elena's attention. She set down her rag and poured herself a finger of bourbon before walking over to Michael's table. "Mind if I join you?" Michael gestured to the empty chair across from him. Elena sat taking a small sip of her drink. "What's your interest in Nexus Security?" she asked directly. Michael studied her for a moment, seeming to weigh how much to share. "I've been investigating them for the past 3 months. They're not what they appear to be." "And what do they appear to be?" "On paper, a private security firm that handles protection for Ascendant's properties and executives. In reality," he hesitated, "they're running drugs, using military transport channels to move product from Afghanistan into the U.S. through military bases." Elena's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation." "I have evidence. Not enough yet, but I'm getting there." He took a sip of his beer. "Nexus is run by a former CIA operative named Marcus Reynolds. He leverages his government connections to access military shipments without proper inspection. They hide their product in equipment crates, medical supplies, anything being sent back from overseas. Elena felt a cold sensation spread through her chest at the mention of the name. "Reynolds," she repeated quietly. Michael caught her reaction. "You know him." "I know of him." Elena set her glass down carefully. "My husband mentioned that name in his letters from Desert Storm. Said Reynolds was running some kind of operation called Mirage that didn't feel right." Now it was Michael's turn to look surprised. "Your husband knew about Mirage." "He didn't say much, just that Reynolds was CIA working outside normal channels, and that Jack was uncomfortable with whatever they were doing." She paused, memories surfacing that she hadn't examined in years. His last letter mentioned that he was going to report some irregularities up the chain of command. 2 weeks later, I got the visit telling me he'd died in a training accident. Michael leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Walsh, I don't think your husband died in an accident. I think Reynolds had him killed." The statement hung in the air between them, monstrous in its implications. Elena felt her throat tighten, her hands suddenly cold, despite the warmth of the bar. For decades, she had accepted the official explanation of Jack's death, not because it made sense, but because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. "That's a hell of a thing to say to someone." She finally managed her voice barely above a whisper. "I know." Michael's eyes held genuine regret. "And I wouldn't say it if I wasn't certain. Reynolds has a pattern. Anyone who gets too close to his operation has a habit of disappearing or dying under suspicious circumstances. I've traced at least 7 deaths back to him, all military personnel who were in positions to expose his smuggling network." "Why are you investigating this? Are you law enforcement?" "Danny?" Michael shook his head. "No. Personal reasons." He hesitated again before continuing. "My brother was Army Rangers stationed at Bagram. He noticed some irregularities with shipments being handled by Nexus contractors, started asking questions. 3 weeks later, he was killed in what was reported as an insurgent attack. Except there were no insurgent claims of responsibility, no witnesses, and his body was cremated before I could see it." Understanding dawned on Elena. "So you're after revenge?" "Justice," Michael corrected. "I want Reynolds and his entire operation exposed. I want the families of everyone he's killed to know the truth. And I want him to spend the rest of his life in a cell thinking about what he's done." Elena stood abruptly, walking back to the bar. She reached beneath it and pulled out a metal lockbox. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked it and removed a bundle of envelopes tied with faded blue ribbon. "These are Jack's letters from Desert Storm," she said, returning to the table. "I haven't read them since right after, but I remember him mentioning Reynolds several times." She untied the ribbon carefully and sorted through the envelopes until she found the ones she was looking for. "Here, this one mentions Mirage for the first time." She pulled out the letter, the paper yellowed with age, and began to read. "Something strange is happening here, Ellie. There's an operation called Mirage being run by a CIA spook named Reynolds. Our unit got tasked to provide security for some shipments, but we're not allowed to inspect the cargo. When Johnson asked questions, he got shut down hard by command. Reynolds has pull with someone way up the chain. I don't like it. Feels wrong." She set that letter aside and found another. "Reynolds was here again today. 3 more shipments went out under Mirage. I overheard him talking about product and market value when he thought no one was listening. This isn't about intelligence gathering. Whatever they're moving, it's for profit. I'm going to document everything I can. If this is what I think it is, someone needs to know." Elena's hands shook more visibly as she unfolded the final letter, the last one Jack ever wrote. "I confronted Reynolds today about the shipments. Big mistake. He didn't threaten me directly, but the message was clear. He said men who stick their noses where they don't belong tend to have accidents in war zones. I'm going to General Harrison tomorrow with what I know. If something happens to me, Ellie, know that I love you more than life itself. And know that whatever they tell you about how I died, you should question it." The letter slipped from Elena's fingers, floating to the table like a fallen leaf. She had read these words before in the raw aftermath of Jack's death, but grief had blinded her to their true meaning. Or perhaps she had simply been unwilling to face the implications that her husband had been murdered for threatening to expose corruption. "2 days after I received this letter," she said, her voice hollow, "2 officers showed up at my door to tell me Jack had died in a helicopter training exercise. Mechanical failure, they said. Body unrecoverable." Her eyes met Michael's. "I always thought it was strange. Jack was meticulous about equipment checks. And why would a SEAL team be doing helicopter training in the middle of a combat deployment?" Michael reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but offering proximity. "Mrs. Walsh, Elena, I believe your husband was killed because he was going to expose Reynolds's operation. The same operation that's still running today, just with different products and different routes." "How can you be sure it's the same man, the same operation? It's been over 30 years. The methods match, the connections match." And he hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. "This was taken 3 weeks ago at Fort Huachuca. The man on the left is Marcus Reynolds." Elena stared at the image. The man was older, mid-60s now, with steel-gray hair and the lean build of someone who maintained military discipline decades after leaving service. But the face, the sharp nose, the calculating eyes, the thin lips pressed into a perpetual expression of contempt, was unmistakable. "I've seen him before," she whispered, "at Jack's memorial service. He came up to me afterward, offered condolences, said Jack was a fine soldier who understood the meaning of duty and sacrifice. I remember thinking it was an odd choice of words." "He was there to make sure you didn't ask questions," Michael said quietly, "to assess whether you knew anything. And now his company is pressuring me to sell my bar." Elena looked up, a terrible realization dawning. "This isn't a coincidence, is it? Mercer showing up now, Reynolds being involved?"
"I don't think so. I've been tracking their shipments. They're establishing a new route through this area using Fort Huachuca as a distribution point. Your bar sits on a strategic location, easy access to the highway, close to the base, isolated enough for discrete operations."
Elena felt anger rising to replace the shock, a slow-burning rage that had been buried for decades beneath grief and uncertainty. All these years she had honored Jack's memory by building his dream, by creating a sanctuary for veterans like him. And all along, the man responsible for his death had continued his operations unchecked, destroying other lives, other families. "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice hardening with resolve. Michael seemed taken aback by the directness of her question. "I'm not asking you to get involved, Mrs. Walsh. This is dangerous. Reynolds has killed to protect his operation before. He won't hesitate to do it again." "I've been involved for 32 years without knowing it," Elena replied. "My husband died trying to stop this man. I built this bar to honor Jack's memory, but maybe the real way to honor him is to finish what he started." She gathered the letters, carefully folding them and returning them to their envelopes. "So I'll ask you again, what do you need from me?" Michael studied her for a long moment, assessing her determination. Finally, he nodded. "Information, access, a base of operations. I've been working alone, which limits what I can do. With your connections in the military and local community, we might be able to gather enough evidence to take to the FBI or DEA. "You'll have it," Elena said without hesitation. "And something else, you need allies." She gestured around the empty bar. "I know people, veterans, law enforcement people, who owe me favors. Good people who can help. The more people who know, the riskier it gets," Michael warned. "Some risks are worth taking." Elena stood, decision made. "My husband believed in doing what's right, no matter the cost. It's time I lived up to that example." As she looked at the faded photograph of Jack in his uniform hanging above the bar, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, purpose beyond mere survival. For 3 decades, she had been keeping Jack's dream alive. Now she would fight for his justice. What she didn't yet realize was that the battle ahead would force her to confront not only the man who had orchestrated Jack's death, but also the question of how far she was willing to go for vengeance, and whether justice and revenge could ever be truly separated. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The Arizona desert offering one of its perfect autumn days. Crystalline blue sky temperature hovering in the high 60s, the distant mountains sharp against the horizon. Elena rose before sunrise as she had every day since opening the bar. Routine anchored her, providing structure in a world that had often seemed determined to knock her off balance. But today, even familiar patterns felt different. As she showered, dressed, and prepared for the day ahead, Jack's last letter kept replaying in her mind. "If something happens to me, Ellie, know that I love you more than life itself. And know that whatever they tell you about how I died, you should question it." She had questioned it in those early days of grief, but the military stonewalled her inquiries. Classified operation, national security, need-to-know basis. Eventually exhausted by bureaucracy and overwhelmed by loss, she had accepted the official story. What would have happened if she had pushed harder? If she had demanded answers investigated on her own? Could she have exposed Reynolds 30 years ago, prevented him from harming others? The questions haunted her as she mounted Jack's old Softail. The motorcycle roared to life beneath her, the familiar vibration traveling up through her body. She had maintained it meticulously over the decades, replacing parts when necessary, but keeping it as close to original as possible. It wasn't just transportation, it was a connection to Jack, a way of keeping him present in her daily life. The morning air bit at her face as she rode through the outskirts of Pine Ridge toward the cemetery. She hadn't planned this detour, but some part of her needed to visit Jack before embarking on whatever lay ahead. Pine Ridge Cemetery occupied a gentle slope overlooking the town, the neat rows of headstones catching the early light. Elena parked the Softail and walked the familiar path to Jack's grave, a simple military marker with his name, rank, dates of service, and the sealed trident emblem. She knelt beside the stone, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "Hey, sailor," she said softly, her usual greeting. "Looks like I'm finally going to finish the mission you started. 32 years late, but better than never, right?" The stone offered no response, but Elena felt a sense of rightness in her decision. Jack had died trying to expose corruption. She would see it through, whatever the cost. "I don't know if this will bring peace, or just stir up more pain," she continued, "but I know you'd want the truth to come out. You always said a SEAL finishes the job no matter what." She placed her hand on the cool marble. "I'm not a SEAL, but I am your wife. That means something." She stayed a few moments longer, the desert silence wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. Then she rose, her knees protesting slightly, and made her way back to the motorcycle. As she mounted the Softail, she noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked at the cemetery entrance, a vehicle that hadn't been there when she arrived. It could be nothing a coincidence, another mourner arriving to pay respects. But instinct honed by years of managing a bar frequented by rough characters told her otherwise. Elena took a different route back to town, weaving through side streets and watching her mirrors. The SUV didn't appear to follow, but the sense of being watched lingered. If Reynolds had indeed been monitoring her for years, making sure she never asked too many questions about Jack's death, then her conversation with Michael had likely triggered increased surveillance. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it hardened her resolve. She was tired of living in the shadow of half-truths and unanswered questions. tired of honoring Jack's memory without honoring his final fight for truth. By the time she reached Route 66 to begin her pre-opening routine, Elena Walsh had made a decision. Reynolds had taken Jack from her. He had stolen decades that should have been theirs together. He had built an empire on corruption, drugs, and death. She would tear it down, brick by bloody brick. Bill Hernandez had been coming to Route 66 since opening day. At 65, the former Marine still carried himself with military bearing despite the slight stoop in his shoulders and the limp from an old combat wound. His weathered face, dominated by a magnificent salt and pepper mustache, had seen 3 wars and decades of Arizona sun. "You're either planning a murder or a wedding," he said, settling onto his usual bar stool. "And since I don't see any bridal magazines, I'm guessing it's the former." Elena looked up from the notepad, where she'd been jotting down thoughts. The bar wouldn't open for another hour, but Bill always arrived early on Fridays, a tradition dating back to when he would help her stock the coolers in exchange for the first beer of the day. "Just thinking," she replied, sliding his usual Budweiser across the bar. "Dangerous pastime." Bill took a long drink. "Want to share, or should I mind my business?" Elena hesitated. Michael had warned about involving too many people, but if she was going to build a team to take down Reynolds, Bill would be an essential part of it. His connections in the veterans community ran deep, and his 20 years as a Marine had given him skills that remained sharp despite retirement. "What do you know about Marcus Reynolds?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. Bill's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his shoulders. CIA spook from the old school. Ran operations in Central America in the 80s, then shifted to the Middle East. Why, he came up in a conversation. Someone mentioned he's connected to Nexus Security. Bill's eyes narrowed. "Nexus? That's the outfit providing security for the new development, trying to buy you outright." When Elena nodded, he continued, "Reynolds running security seems like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. Man's got a reputation for efficiency." "Efficiency? That's the polite term." Bill glanced around the empty bar before leaning closer. Less polite version is that he gets results and doesn't much care about the collateral damage. There were rumors during Desert Storm about him running side operations using military resources for personal profit. Nothing proven, of course. Elena felt a chill at the confirmation. Jack mentioned him in his letters, said Reynolds was running something called Operation Mirage that didn't seem above board. Bill's hand froze halfway to his beer. "Jack knew about Mirage. You've heard of it." The older man set his beer down carefully. "Whispers, nothing more. But the kind of whispers that make career military men nervous. There was talk about unauthorized shipments, unmarked cargo personnel being reassigned without proper documentation. And anyone who asked too many questions ended up transferred to the worst assignments possible, or suffered convenient accidents." Elena's throat tightened. Like helicopter training mishaps, understanding dawned in Bill's eyes. "Elena, are you saying, I think Jack was killed because he was going to report Reynolds for running drugs or weapons through military channels? And I think Reynolds is still doing it today through Nexus Security." Bill let out a low whistle. "That's one hell of an accusation." "I know, and I need your help to prove it." For a moment, Bill was silent, processing the request. When he spoke, his voice held the careful neutrality of someone weighing serious risks. "What exactly are you planning, Elena?" "I'm not sure yet, but I know I can't just let this go. Not again." She explained her conversation with Michael, the evidence he had been gathering, and the connection to Ascendant Properties' sudden interest in her bar. Bill listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grave. When she finished, he took a long pull from his beer before responding. "You're talking about going up against people who have killed to protect their secrets. People with connections in government, military, and private sector. People with resources we can't match." "I know. And you're willing to risk everything. This bar, your safety, Maybe your life to pursue this. Reet. Elena met his gaze steadily. Jack died trying to expose the truth. I owe it to him to finish what he started. Bill nodded slowly, a decision crystallizing behind his eyes. Then you'll need more than just me and your mysterious Michael Cooper. You'll need a team. People with specific skills. People you can trust, absolutely. I was hoping you'd say that. Let me make some calls. There's Sarah Mitchell. She was a combat nurse in Desert Storm, now works at the VA. Sharp as they come and knows how to be discreet. And Ray Blackwood, he may be 70, but that old Vietnam pilot still flies his Cessna for weekend trips. Could be useful for surveillance. Elena felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, Bill. Don't thank me yet. He finished his beer and set the empty bottle down with deliberate precision. If we're really doing this, we need to be smart. Reynolds has stayed in business this long because he's careful and ruthless. We start asking questions, poking around his operation, he'll react. I'm counting on it, Elena said, a hard edge entering her voice. I want him to know someone's coming for him. I want him to feel hunted the way Jack must have felt in those final days. Bill studied her face. This isn't just about justice for you, is it? It's about revenge. Is there a difference when someone's murdered your husband? There is, Bill said quietly, and Jack would want you to remember that. Justice holds up in the light of day. Revenge belongs to the darkness. One heals, the other consumes. Elena wanted to argue, but found she couldn't. Bill had known Jack almost as long as she had. They had served together before Jack joined the SEALs, maintained their friendship through deployments and transfers. I'll try to remember the difference, she conceded. Good. Bill stood reaching for his wallet. On the house? Elena said, waving him off. Consider it a consultation fee. In that case, I'll be back tonight with Sarah and Ray. We'll meet after closing, say midnight, fewer ears that way. Elena nodded. I'll have Michael here too. Time he shared everything he knows. After Bill left, Elena returned to her notepad. But instead of strategies and questions, she found herself sketching Jack's face, the strong jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes, the slightly crooked smile that had first captured her heart. Beneath the sketch, she wrote a single word: justice. She hoped she could deliver it. She feared she might settle for revenge. Either way, Marcus Reynolds would answer for what he had done. The Friday night crowd at Route 66 was particularly rowdy. A motorcycle club from Phoenix had stopped in on their way to a rally in Tucson, filling the bar with leather tattoos and boisterous laughter. Elena welcomed the chaos. It provided excellent cover for the meeting scheduled for midnight. She moved through the evening in a fog of mechanical efficiency, serving drinks, resolving minor disputes, keeping the jukebox stocked with quarters. Her mind, however, remained fixed on the photographs and letters hidden in her office evidence of a 30-year-old crime that had shaped her entire adult life. At precisely 11, Michael Cooper arrived, taking his usual corner seat. Tonight, he seemed even more vigilant than usual, his eyes constantly tracking movement throughout the bar. When their gazes met briefly, he gave a slight nod before returning to his observation. By 11:45, the crowd had thinned considerably. Elena announced last call, served the final round of drinks, and began the process of ushering remaining patrons toward the door. By midnight, only 5 people remained: Elena, Michael, Bill, and 2 individuals Elena recognized but had never seen together in her bar. Sarah Mitchell had the compact build of someone who maintained military fitness standards long after leaving service. At 55, her auburn hair showed significant strands of silver pulled back in a practical bun. Her eyes, sharp, assessing missing nothing, scanned the room with professional interest. As head nurse at the VA hospital's psychiatric ward, she had spent decades working with traumatized veterans. She had seen the human wreckage of war up close and developed a fierce protectiveness toward those who had served. Ray Blackwood seemed to be Sarah's physical opposite. Tall, rail-thin, with a shock of white hair that refused to be tamed, The 70-year-old former pilot moved with the loose-limbed ease of someone perpetually ready for action. His weathered face carried the permanent tan of a man who spent more time outdoors than in, and his faded Vietnam veteran cap was worn with quiet pride. Elena locked the front door, flipped the sign to "closed," and drew the blinds. Then she led the group to the back room, a space normally used for storage, but occasionally converted for private events. A scarred oak table dominated the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Maps of Pine Ridge and the surrounding area were pinned to one wall, while another held framed photographs of Route 66's history opening day charity events, celebrations, and memorials. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, once everyone was seated. "Some of you already know pieces of what I'm about to share. Others are hearing it for the first time. All of you are here because I trust you with my life, and because I believe you'll want to be part of this, once you understand what's happening." She gestured to Michael. "This is Michael Cooper, former Special Forces. He's been investigating Nexus Security and their connection to drug smuggling through military channels. Michael, these are my friends Bill Hernandez, Marines, Sarah Mitchell, Army nurse, and Ray Blackwood, Air Force pilot." Michael acknowledged each with a nod, but remained guarded. "Before we go further, I need to be clear about the risks. What we're discussing isn't just illegal activity, it's a deeply entrenched operation with connections in government and military. The man running it, Marcus Reynolds, has eliminated people for far less than what we're planning." "We understand the risks," Sarah said, her voice calm but resolute. Bill explained enough to make that clear. What he did not explain is why Elena is suddenly chasing ghosts from Desert Storm. Elena took a deep breath. "Because my husband Jack didn't die in a training accident like I was told. He was murdered because he was going to expose Reynolds' operation, a smuggling ring that started 30 years ago and continues today." She placed Jack's letters on the table along with Michael's photographs and notes. "Reynolds is now running security for Ascendant Properties, the development company trying to buy this bar. I believe they want this location because it's strategic for their distribution network, close to the base, easy highway access, isolated enough for discrete operations." Ray picked up one of Michael's surveillance photos, studying it through reading glasses perched on his nose. "This shipment schedule, it matches some unusual flight patterns I've noticed at the small airstrip near Fort Huachuca. Private planes coming in late, minimal ground crew, no standard cargo handling." Michael leaned forward. "You've been watching the airstrip, Earth." "Not deliberately," Ray said. "But when you've been flying as long as I have, you notice things that break pattern. Military installations have rhythms. These flights didn't fit the usual tempo." "Can you get closer? Maybe fly over during one of their shipments?" Ray's weathered face split in a grin. "Son, I've been flying that airspace since before you were born. My Cessna 172 is old, but she's quiet, and no one pays much attention to an old Vietnam vet taking scenic flights." Sarah had been examining the letters, her medical training evident in the careful way she handled the fragile paper. "Jack's descriptions match cases I've seen at the VA. Veterans with knowledge of classified operations who suffered accidents or training incidents. Some survived with injuries that never quite aligned with the official reports." "Could any of them testify?" Elena asked. "Most are too traumatized or too worried about losing their benefits. But I might be able to compile anonymous statements patterns that support your theory without putting any individual at risk." Bill, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "I've been making discreet inquiries about Mirage since our conversation this morning. Most of my contacts clammed up immediately, which tells me plenty. But one, a supply sergeant at Huachuca, who owes me, mentioned something interesting. Nexus Security has been conducting specialized training on base using facilities normally reserved for military personnel. No official documentation, no visitor logs." Michael nodded. "That fits their pattern. They integrate with military operations, to gain access to secure areas, then use that access to move product. "So, what's the plan?" Sarah asked, looking around the table. "We've got suspicions and circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete enough to take to authorities." Elena laid out a map of Pine Ridge marking the location of her bar, Fort Huachuca, the airstrip Ray had mentioned, and the new Ascendant Properties development. "We need hard evidence, shipping manifests, financial records, photographs of actual drugs or weapons being moved. Something that can't be dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding." "That means surveillance," Michael said. "Monitoring shipments, tracking personnel, documenting patterns." "And infiltration," Bill added. "Someone needs to get inside either physically or electronically. Records don't just fall into our laps." "I might have a way in," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Reynolds's wife, Catherine, volunteers at the VA hospital twice a month. Reads to patients, brings comfort items, typical politician's wife charity work. But she seems genuine, not entirely comfortable with her husband's world. I could approach her carefully." Elena considered this. "It's risky. If she's loyal to Reynolds—" "I know how to read people," Sarah interrupted gently. "Comes with the territory when you work with trauma patients. I'll proceed with extreme caution." "Ray, can you start surveillance flights over the airstrip and Nexus facilities?" Michael asked. "Already planning my route," Ray confirmed. "I'll need a good camera with telephoto lens." "I'll handle that," Michael said. "And I'll work my military contacts," Bill added. "See what else I can learn about Nexus's activities on base." "What about me?" Elena asked. "This is my fight, too." Michael hesitated. "You're already taking a huge risk just hosting us. Your bar is likely under surveillance after Mercer's visit. All the more reason for me to be actively involved. I can't just sit back and wait." Her voice took on an edge of steel. "Besides, I have an advantage none of you have. They don't see me as a threat, just a stubborn widow clinging to a rundown bar." "She's right," Bill said. "Elena has been a fixture in this community for decades. She can move around, ask questions, gather information without raising the same alarms we might trigger. And she can handle herself," Sarah added with a small smile. "I've seen her break up fights between men twice her size without breaking a sweat." Michael still looked uncertain, but nodded reluctantly. "We'll need a secure way to communicate. No phones, no emails, anything electronic can be monitored." "Old school it is," Ray said. "Dead drops, coded messages, visual signals, like we did in Nam." "And we'll need a fallback plan," Bill added. "Somewhere to meet if this location is compromised." They continued planning late into the night, assigning responsibilities, establishing communication protocols, identifying potential risks. By the time dawn light began filtering through the blinds, they had the framework of an operation that would have impressed Jack's SEAL team. As they prepared to leave, moving separately to avoid drawing attention, Elena felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had experienced since building the bar. For 30 years, she had preserved Jack's dream. Now she would avenge his death and bring down the man responsible. What she didn't yet realize was that Reynolds had already identified the threat and was preparing his counterattack. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The Arizona dawn painted the desert in shades of amber and gold as Elena guided Jack's old Softail along Route 17. The morning air carried the familiar scent of creosote and dust, a fragrance as much a part of her life as the leather jacket she wore, or the weight of Jack's dog tags against her chest. But this morning ride wasn't about pleasure or routine. This was reconnaissance. 3 miles outside Pine Ridge, just beyond the ridge that gave the town its name, Ascendant Properties had broken ground on their new development. Elena needed to see it firsthand to understand what they were building and why this particular location mattered enough for Mercer to threaten her. She parked the motorcycle behind an outcropping of rocks half a mile from the construction site and pulled out a pair of binoculars military grade, a gift from Bill years ago. Through them, she could make out the early stages of construction foundation trenches, stacks of materials, heavy equipment, awaiting the day's operators. Nothing particularly suspicious on the surface, just the bones of what would become another soulless commercial development. But as she scanned the perimeter, Elena noticed something odd. The security presence was excessive for a standard construction project. Men in black tactical gear, not typical rent-a-cops, patrolled the boundaries. Their movements were disciplined, coordinated. Military training, without question. Near the makeshift office trailer, she spotted a man who matched the photographs Michael had shown her, Marcus Reynolds. Even at a distance, his bearing communicated authority and danger. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the morning air. This was the man responsible for Jack's death. The man who had stolen 30 years they should have shared together. The man whose corruption had likely destroyed other families, other lives. Her hand tightened on the binoculars. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to ride straight into the compound and demand answers, consequences be damned. But the rational part of her, the part that had survived 30 years of widowhood and built a successful business in a world that often underestimated her, knew better. This was a chess match, not a barroom brawl. Patience and strategy would serve her better than righteous fury. She was so focused on Reynolds that she almost missed the unmarked delivery truck approaching the site from the east, the direction of Fort Huachuca. It was military-style olive drab, but without insignia, the kind of vehicle that blended into base traffic without drawing attention. Elena shifted position to get a better view as the truck passed through security without inspection and backed up to the trailer. Reynolds personally oversaw as 4 men unloaded large crates and carried them inside. No labels, no paperwork exchanged. Just efficient, practiced movements and a level of security that seemed wildly disproportionate for construction supplies. She snapped several photos with the small camera Ray had provided, capturing the truck's license plate, the faces of the security team, and Reynolds directing the operation. Then she retreated to her motorcycle before the increasing daylight exposed her position. This was concrete evidence that something irregular was happening. Not proof of drug smuggling, perhaps, but definitely activity that warranted further investigation. Her blood hummed with a mixture of vindication and apprehension. After 30 years of accepting the official story of Jack's death, she was now seeing the truth with her own eyes. The operation he had tried to expose was still active, still corrupt, still destroying lives. As she guided the Softail back toward Pine Ridge, Elena felt Jack's presence more strongly than she had in years, not as a memory or a ghost, but as a mission unfinished. A torch passed from his hands to hers. "I see them now, Jack," she whispered into the wind. "And they're going to see me too, soon enough."
Sis.
Back at Route 66, Elena found Sarah Mitchell waiting in the empty parking lot. The VA nurse leaned against her practical Subaru, a travel mug of coffee in hand, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes alert. "Morning constitutional?" Sarah asked, as Elena dismounted the Harley. "Something like that." Elena nodded toward the bar. "Come inside. I've got something to show you." In the back room, now transformed into their makeshift operations center, Elena downloaded the photos to Michael's laptop and explained what she'd witnessed. Sarah studied the images, her medical training evident in the precise, methodical way she analyzed each detail. "Definitely military-grade shipping containers," she confirmed, pointing to distinctive markings on the crates. "Those are used for secure transport of sensitive materials, medical supplies, weapons, electronics. The locks require specific access codes." "Can you tell what's inside?" Sarah shook her head. "Not from these photos. But I can tell you this: if they're coming directly from the base to an unsecured construction site, someone high up is signing off on it. These containers don't leave military custody without serious authorization." The door opened and Michael entered, his expression tense. Without greeting, he moved directly to the laptop and examined the photos. "You took a significant risk," he said, voice tight with disapproval. "If they had spotted you—" "They didn't," Elena cut him off. "And we needed eyes on their operation. Now we have confirmation that Reynolds is personally overseeing whatever they're moving through that construction site." Michael couldn't argue with the results, but his concern remained evident. "Next time, coordinate with us. Ray could have done aerial surveillance with less risk of detection." "Ray's distinctive old Cessna would draw more attention than a local on a motorcycle," Elena countered. "Besides, I know that terrain like the back of my hand. Grew up hunting rabbits on that ridge with my father." Before Michael could respond, Bill arrived, bringing with him the smell of coffee and bacon. He set a paper bag on the table. "Breakfast," he explained. "Figure we could all use it." He glanced at the laptop screen. "What did I miss?" As Sarah updated him, Elena distributed the food egg sandwiches from Manny's Diner, a local institution almost as old as Route 66 itself. The simple act of sharing a meal created a moment of normalcy amid the increasingly surreal circumstances of their lives. "I've got news of my own," Bill said, after finishing his sandwich. "My contact at Huachuca confirmed that Nexus Security has been granted unusual access to restricted areas, supposedly for joint training operations. But here's the kicker. The authorization came directly from Washington, bypassing normal base command channels." "Reynolds still has connections in high places," Michael noted grimly. "That's how he survived all these years' political protection." "The good news," Bill continued, "is that not everyone's happy about it. There's a young captain in logistics, Jenkins, who's been raising concerns about irregularities in shipping manifests. Items signed out, but never reaching their designated destinations. Supplies requisitioned without proper authorization." "Is he willing to talk to us?" Elena asked. "Not yet. He's career military, wary of rocking the boat. But he might be persuaded if we can show him evidence that what he's seeing connects to something bigger." Sarah wiped her hands on a napkin, her movements precise. "I have an appointment with Catherine Mercer this afternoon. She's coming to the VA to discuss expanding their volunteer program. I can use that opportunity to feel her out, see if she knows anything about her husband's business dealings." Michael shook his head. "Too dangerous. If Reynolds has the slightest suspicion we're investigating him approaching his wife would put a target on your back." "I'm not planning to interrogate her," Sarah replied with the patient tone of someone accustomed to dealing with anxious patients. "Just a casual conversation that might give us insight into what she knows. Women notice things, especially wives of powerful men. They hear conversations, observe patterns, pick up on tensions. And Catherine struck me as someone with her own mind." Elena considered this. "Do it, but be extremely careful. Don't push if she seems suspicious or guarded." She turned to Michael. "What about your sources? Any progress tracking the drug pipeline?" "Some," he admitted. "I've identified 2 former Special Forces operators now working for Nexus men I served with in Afghanistan. They're not bad guys, just mercenaries taking the best-paying gig available. I might be able to approach one of them, feel out whether they know what they're really involved in." "That's even riskier than Sarah talking to Catherine," Bill objected. "Maybe, but these guys have a code. If they're unwittingly helping transport drugs, the same drugs that are destroying veterans' lives back home, they might turn on Reynolds, especially with proper financial incentive." The discussion continued as they refined their approach, assigned tasks, and established timelines. By mid-morning, they had a comprehensive plan for the next 48 hours. Ray would conduct aerial surveillance. Bill would cultivate his contact in logistics. Sarah would meet with Catherine Mercer. Michael would reach out to his former comrades. And Elena would maintain the bar as their cover and command center. What none of them realized was that their investigation had already been compromised, not by external surveillance, but by someone they trusted. The Route 66 was quieter than usual that evening. A Tuesday night in October meant fewer travelers, and even the regulars tended to turn in early. Elena welcomed the lull it gave her time to think, to process the morning's discoveries, and to prepare for whatever came next. She was wiping down the bar when the door opened, admitting a blast of cool night air, and a woman Elena had never seen before. Tall, elegant, with ash-blonde hair pulled into a sophisticated chignon, the newcomer wore clothes that whispered of money without shouting. It tailored slacks, a cashmere sweater, subtle jewelry that caught the light. Elena recognized her immediately from Michael's photographs, Catherine Mercer. Catherine surveyed the bar with curious interest, taking in the memorabilia on the walls. The worn but polished wooden surfaces, the quiet dignity of a place built with love rather than corporate planning. Then her gaze settled on Elena. "Mrs. Walsh?" she asked, approaching the bar with measured steps. Elena set down her cloth. "That's right. What can I get you?" "We're not exactly known for our wine selection, but I keep a decent Cabernet for the rare customer who asks." A small smile touched Catherine's lips. "Bourbon if you have it." "Neat." Elena reached for the good stuff, Blanton's reserved for special occasions and discerning palates. She poured 2 fingers into a tumbler and slid it across the bar. Catherine took an appreciative sip. "You're wondering why I'm here." The thought crossed my mind. "Your husband made his pitch last week. Wasn't much interested in his offer then. Still not interested now. I'm not here about the property." Catherine glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, though only 2 other patrons remained, both engrossed in a football game playing on the ancient TV in the corner. "I'm here about Sarah Mitchell." Elena kept her expression neutral, though alarm bells rang in her mind. "What about her?" "She approached me today at the VA hospital, asked some very specific questions about James's business dealings, Nexus Security and their operations at Fort Huachuca. Questions that someone in her position shouldn't know to ask." The air between them seemed to thicken. Elena considered denying any connection, but something in Catherine's demeanor, a certain tension in her shoulders, a watchfulness in her eyes, suggested a different approach might be more productive. "And you came here to warn me?" Elena asked, direct and unflinching. In a manner of speaking, Catherine took another sip of bourbon. "My husband may seem like just another aggressive developer, but the company he keeps is dangerous. Particularly Marcus Reynolds." Elena's pulse quickened. "You know Reynolds?" "I've known him for 20 years. I know what he's capable of." Catherine leaned forward slightly. "Whatever you and your friends are investigating, you need to stop. Reynolds doesn't issue warnings or make threats. He simply eliminates problems." "Is that why you're here? To tell me to back off?" Catherine's gaze held steady. "I'm here because I recognized Sarah's questions for what they were fishing for information about Operation Mirage." The name hung in the air between them like a live grenade. Elena made a split-second decision. "Your husband is working with Reynolds to move drugs through military channels using Ascendant Properties as cover. The same operation that got my husband killed 32 years ago when he tried to expose it." If Catherine was shocked by this direct accusation, she didn't show it. Instead, she reached into her purse and removed a small flash drive, placing it on the bar between them. "3 months ago, I found financial discrepancies in James's business accounts. Substantial sums moving through shell companies' off-book payments to Nexus Security, unusual cash withdrawals. When I questioned him, he became evasive, then threatening." She tapped the flash drive. "I've been gathering evidence ever since. This contains account numbers, transaction records, and communication logs that connect Ascendant to Nexus and trace both back to a larger distribution network." Elena stared at the small device, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I want out," Catherine said simply. "I've spent 2 decades building a life with a man I thought I knew, only to discover he's been lying to me from the beginning. The charitable foundation I run, the community work I do, it's all been funded with drug money. Money that's destroyed countless lives." including my husband's. Catherine nodded. Reynolds has a pattern. Anyone who threatens his operation dies in accidents that never quite add up. I found references to a SEAL named Walsh in some of James's old files. The details were minimal, but it was clearly a sanctioned elimination. Elena's hands tightened on the edge of the bar, the wood biting into her palms. Why should I trust you? This could be a trap, a way to identify everyone involved in our investigation. A fair question. Catherine finished her bourbon in one smooth motion. You shouldn't trust me. Not yet. But verify what's on that drive. If it checks out, we can discuss next steps. She stood adjusting her purse strap. I'll be at the Coronado Hotel through Friday, room 412. If you decide to trust me, come alone. Reynolds has eyes everywhere, including people you might consider allies. With that cryptic warning, she turned and left as elegantly as she had arrived, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft thud. Elena stared at the flash drive for a long moment before picking it up. It could be exactly what they needed. Concrete evidence linking Reynolds and Mercer to illegal operations. Or it could be malware designed to access their files and identify everyone involved in the investigation. She tucked it into her pocket. Michael would need to examine it on a secure, isolated computer before they risked exposing their network. As she continued her closing routine, Catherine's parting warning echoed in her mind. Reynolds had eyes everywhere, including people they considered allies. The implication was clear and disturbing. Someone in their small group might be compromised. But who? Bill had been her friend for decades. Sarah was respected throughout the veteran community for her integrity and compassion. Ray had fought alongside Jack in Vietnam, and Michael, though newer to their circle, had initiated the investigation at great personal risk. Elena locked the front door, turned off the lights, and made her way to the back room where their evidence and plans were stored. She needed to secure everything until she could determine whether Catherine's warning was legitimate or merely a tactic to sow distrust among them. As she opened the door to the storage room, a shadow moved in the darkness. Elena reached for the baseball bat she kept near the entrance, her muscles tensing for confrontation. It's me. Michael's voice came quietly from the far corner. He stepped into the dim light filtering from the hallway. We need to talk, now. Michael's face was grim as he laid out what he had discovered. After leaving their morning meeting, he had followed Sarah not out of suspicion, but concern for her safety, given her plan to approach Catherine Mercer. What he witnessed had shocked him. She didn't go to the VA hospital, he explained, pacing the small room. She drove directly to Fort Huachuca, entered through a secure gate using what appeared to be military credentials, and spent 2 hours inside the administrative building where Nexus has its offices. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her certainties. That doesn't make sense. Sarah's worked at the VA for years. Everyone in the veteran community knows her. Her credentials could be legitimate VA staff, sometimes consult at military hospitals. But she specifically told us she was meeting Catherine at the VA, not on base, and she went straight to the Nexus offices. Could she be running her own parallel investigation? Maybe she didn't want to risk us objecting to her approach. Michael shook his head. I considered that. But when she emerged, she was escorted by Reynolds himself. Their body language was familiar, comfortable. They spoke for several minutes before she left. The implications were staggering. Sarah, a trusted friend, someone who had attended Jack's memorial service, who had cared for countless veterans suffering from PTSD and addiction, might be working with the very man responsible for their suffering. We can't jump to conclusions, Elena said, though doubt had already taken root. There could be an explanation. There is. Michael pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos. Sarah and Reynolds standing close, talking intently. Sarah accepting an envelope. Reynolds placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that suggested both familiarity and authority. I did some digging after seeing this, Michael continued. Sarah's financials show regular deposits from a shell corporation that traces back to Nexus. Monthly payments for the past 8 years. Elena sat heavily in a nearby chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her shoulders. She's been working for them all along. But why? What possible reason could she have for helping people who profit from destruction? Money is the simplest explanation. VA nurses don't make much. But there could be more to it. Coercion, compromise, blackmail. Reynolds specializes in finding people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. The back door opened, and both Elena and Michael tensed. Bill entered looking exhausted but alert. His eyes narrowed at their expressions. "What happened?" he asked immediately. Elena hesitated, then decided that if they couldn't trust Bill after 30 years of friendship, they couldn't trust anyone. She explained Michael's discovery about Sarah, showing him the photographs and financial evidence. Bill listened in silence, his weathered face growing increasingly somber. When she finished, he rubbed a hand across his face. "I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. I've had suspicions about Sarah for years." "What?" Elena stared at him. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because they were just suspicions, nothing concrete. And because she's done genuine good for countless veterans. I wanted to believe her work at the VA balanced whatever else she might be involved in." He sighed heavily. But the timing of certain information leaks over the years always seemed to coincide with her involvement in veterans' advocacy projects, particularly projects that might have exposed aspects of the drug pipeline through military channels. Michael's expression hardened. She's not just a passive informant. She's actively working to protect Reynolds' operation by identifying and neutralizing threats from within the veteran community. And now she knows everything about our investigation. Elena said, the full implications hitting her. Every piece of evidence we've gathered, every contact we've established, every plan we've made. Not quite everything, Michael said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook. "I keep my primary sources and most crucial evidence separate. Old habits from Afghanistan. But she knows enough to compromise us significantly." Bill moved to the wall map where they had marked key locations in their investigation. "We need to assume Reynolds now knows we're on to him. He'll accelerate whatever timeline he's working on and eliminate potential threats, meaning us. We should warn Ray." Elena began reaching for her phone. Michael stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "No calls. They could be monitoring our communications. I'll find Ray personally and bring him up to speed." "What about the flash drive?" Elena pulled it from her pocket, explaining Catherine Mercer's unexpected visit. "If this contains what she claims, it could give us enough evidence to go to the FBI or DEA, even with Sarah compromised." Michael examined the small device warily. "It could also be a Trojan horse malware, designed to access our files or track our movements. We need to check it on an isolated system." "I know someone who can help," Bill said. "Former NSA analyst who owes me a favor. Lives off the grid about 30 miles from here. No phone, no internet, just the way he likes it. I can take the drive to him tonight." Elena nodded. "Do it. And Bill, be careful. If Sarah has been compromised for years, we have to consider that others might be as well." "Trust no one," Bill agreed grimly. "Especially those closest to us." After Bill departed with the flash drive, Elena and Michael worked silently to secure their remaining evidence and develop contingency plans. The betrayal had shaken them both, but it had also crystallized their resolve. This was no longer just about exposing Reynolds or finding justice for Jack. It was about survival. "You should leave town," Michael said as they finished, "at least until we know what we're dealing with. I have contacts who can set you up with a new identity somewhere Reynolds can't reach you." Elena looked around the back room of Route 66, at the photographs chronicling 3 decades of memories, at the mementos of the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. This bar wasn't just a business. It was Jack's dream made manifest. It was her legacy, her purpose, her home. "I'm not running," she said firmly. "If Reynolds wants a fight, he'll get one. but it'll be on my terms, not his. Michael studied her face, recognizing the same determination he had seen in soldiers who had found their line in the sand, the point beyond which retreat was unthinkable. He nodded once, respecting her decision, even as he calculated how to protect her from its consequences. "Then we prepare for war," he said simply. As they sealed the room and prepared to part ways for the night, Elena felt a strange calm settling over her. The discovery of Sarah's betrayal should have devastated her, but instead, it had burned away the last of her uncertainties. For 32 years, she had lived in the shadow of half-truths and unanswered questions, building a life around preserving a memory while never truly moving forward. Now, with everything at risk, she felt more alive than she had in decades. The path ahead was dangerous, perhaps fatal. But it was also clear for the first time since those military officers had appeared at her door with news of Jack's death. Reynolds had taken Jack from her. He had corrupted Sarah and countless others. He had built an empire on death and addiction. Elena would tear it all down even if it meant burning alongside it. As she locked the bar and walked to her small apartment above it, she felt Jack's presence more strongly than ever. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a purpose, inherited. A mission that had passed from his hands to hers across decades of silence. "I'm coming for them, Jack," she whispered into the Arizona night, "just like you would have." The next morning dawned with an ominous stillness. Elena woke before sunrise, her body tense with the anticipation of conflict. She moved through her morning routine, mechanically shower, coffee, weapons check. The Remington stayed beneath the bar, but she now carried Jack's old service pistol, a Colt M1911, that she had maintained meticulously over the decades. It fit her hand as if made for her. She was checking the front door locks when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Bill's number. "Elena," his voice was tight with urgency, "don't open the bar today. Reynolds knows everything. Sarah talked." "How bad?" "The worst. My NSA friend checked the flash drive. It's legitimate, contains everything Catherine claimed and more. But while he was analyzing it, his security systems detected multiple vehicles approaching his property." Elena's blood ran cold. "Is he—" "He's okay. We got out through an escape tunnel he'd built. Paranoid bastard had an entire bug-out plan ready to go. But they were Nexus security forces, heavily armed and moving with tactical precision. They knew exactly where to look." "How would they know where you were taking the drive?" "We only decided that last night." Bill's silence spoke volumes. "You think Sarah was listening?" Elena asked, the betrayal cutting deeper. "Or the room is bugged. Either way, they're moving fast to contain the situation. My contact is taking the flash drive to the FBI field office in Tucson. I'm going to ground for a few days, got a hunting cabin up in the mountains that no one knows about." "What about Ray and Michael?" "Haven't been able to reach them. Last I knew, Michael was headed to warn Ray." Bill's voice lowered. "Elena, you need to disappear too. They'll come for the bar next. It's the center of our operation, and Reynolds knows it." As if summoned by his words, Elena spotted 3 black SUVs turning onto the street 2 blocks away, moving with deliberate purpose toward Route 66. "Too late," she said calmly. "They're already here. Get out now, back exit, take the Softail. No time. And I'm not abandoning Jack's bar without a fight." Elena moved quickly to the security panel and activated the metal shutters she had installed years ago after a series of break-ins. They rolled down over the windows with a solid clang. "I've got good sight lines, plenty of ammunition, and enough supplies to hold out until help arrives." "Elena, please." Bill's voice cracked with emotion. "Don't throw your life away. Jack wouldn't want—" "Jack would do exactly what I'm doing," she interrupted. "You know that better than anyone." She checked the Colt's magazine and chambered around. "Get that flash drive to the FBI. Make sure they understand what they're dealing with. And Bill, thank you for everything." She ended the call before he could respond and moved to a position behind the bar that offered both cover and a clear view of the front entrance. The SUVs had stopped across the street. Men in tactical gear, at least 8 that she could see, were deploying in a standard breach formation. Their weapons weren't visible yet, but Elena had no doubts about their intentions. This wasn't a negotiation or an arrest. This was a cleanup operation. Her phone rang again, an unknown number this time. She answered without speaking. Mrs. Walsh. The voice was cultured, confident, coldly professional. This is Marcus Reynolds. I believe we have a situation that requires immediate resolution. Elena felt a surge of hatred so powerful it nearly took her breath away. This was the man who had ordered Jack's death, who had corrupted Sarah, who had built an empire on suffering and addiction. Resolution, she repeated, keeping her voice steady. Is that what you call sending armed men to kill a widow, defending her property? A regrettable but necessary precaution given your recent activities. My men are there to secure potentially dangerous materials and detain individuals involved in an ongoing security investigation. No one needs to be hurt. Bullshit, Elena said flatly. You're here to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence just like you did with Jack 32 years ago. A brief silence followed. When Reynolds spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. So that's what this is about. Ancient history and misplaced vengeance. It's about justice. For Jack and everyone else you've killed to protect your operation. Mrs. Walsh, Elena, you're operating on incomplete information. Your husband's death, while unfortunate, was not what you've been led to believe. Operation Mirage was a sanctioned intelligence-gathering mission with national security implications. Jack Walsh stumbled into something he didn't understand and made assumptions that could have compromised vital operations. Save it for someone who might believe you. Through the shuttered windows, Elena could see Reynolds's men taking positions around the building. You're a drug dealer with a government pedigree, nothing more. And now I have proof, financial records, shipping manifests, communication logs. Everything needed to expose your entire operation. Another pause, longer this time. Catherine, Reynolds said more to himself than to Elena. I underestimated her resourcefulness. You seem to make a habit of underestimating women. Perhaps, his voice hardened, but I rarely make the same mistake twice. My offer stands: surrender, peacefully. Turn over all materials related to your investigation, and you'll be treated fairly. Continue this futile resistance, and I cannot guarantee your safety. Elena checked her sightlines again. The tactical team had completely surrounded Route 66. Through gaps in the shutters, she could see them preparing breaching equipment for the doors. Here's my counter-offer, she said, matching his cold professionalism. Tell your men to stand down and withdraw. Then turn yourself in to federal authorities. Confess to 3 decades of drug smuggling, money laundering, and murder. Do that, and maybe, just maybe, you'll avoid the death penalty. Reynolds actually chuckled. You have your husband's spirit, Mrs. Walsh. I admired that in him, even as I recognized the threat it posed. His voice took on a note of what might almost have been regret. I'll give you 60 seconds to reconsider. After that, my men have their orders. The line went dead. Elena set the phone down and took a deep, steadying breath. 60 seconds to prepare for an assault by trained professionals with superior numbers and equipment. The odds were overwhelming, the outcome all but certain. Yet she felt no fear, only a strange sense of clarity and purpose. If this was to be her last stand, she would make it count. She would ensure that Reynolds paid a price he would remember, even if she wasn't there to see his eventual downfall. 55 seconds. She checked her weapon one final time. 50 seconds. She said a brief prayer, not for salvation, but for strength. 45 seconds. She thought of Jack, wondering if she would see him soon. 40 seconds. She positioned herself for maximum coverage of entry points. 35 seconds. She heard the tactical team's final preparations. 30 seconds. She took another deep breath, steadying her aim. 25 seconds. Silence fell outside the calm before the storm. 20 seconds. She thought of Bill, hoping he would get the evidence to the authorities. 15 seconds. She wondered if Michael and Ray had escaped. 10 seconds. She whispered Jack's name like a talisman. 5 seconds. She prepared for the breach. 3, 2, 1. The world exploded into chaos. The front door exploded, inward hinges shrieking as metal tore from wood. Flashbang grenades followed, detonating in blinding bursts of light and sound, designed to disorient and incapacitate. But Elena was ready. Her ears protected by shooting earplugs, her eyes closed at the critical moment. As the tactical team surged through the breach, she squeezed off 2 precision shots from behind the bar. Not aiming to kill, she wasn't a soldier or an executioner, but targeting legs with the accuracy honed from decades of practice at Jack's insistence. 2 men went down, their shouts of pain echoing through the smoke-filled room. "Hold your fire!" a commanding voice ordered from outside. The assault team hesitated, surprised by the effective resistance. In that moment of confusion, Elena triggered her backup plan. With a practiced motion, she yanked the cord running behind the bar, releasing the mechanism Jack had built into the foundation of Route 66 during its construction, a design feature inspired by his SEAL training. The bar's ancient sprinkler system engaged, but instead of water, it sprayed a dense, oily smoke that filled the main room in seconds. Not toxic, but disorienting and obscuring, reducing visibility to inches. Beneath the cover of this manufactured chaos, Elena slipped through the hidden passage behind the jukebox, an escape route known only to her. The narrow corridor led down to the basement and then to a maintenance tunnel originally built to access water lines. Jack had discovered it during renovation and incorporated it into his design, envisioning it as an emergency exit in case of fire. Elena had never expected to use it to escape armed men, but she silently thanked her husband's paranoia as she navigated the cramped space by feel alone. Behind her, shouts of confusion echoed through the bar as Reynolds's men discovered their quarry had vanished. Orders were barked, formations reorganized. They would find the passage eventually, but by then she would be long gone. The tunnel emerged in a drainage culvert, half a block away, hidden from street view by overgrown desert shrubs. Elena pulled herself out, ignoring the protests of joints unaccustomed to such gymnastics, and oriented herself quickly. The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet neighborhood, residents still asleep or already departed for work. From this vantage point, she could see Route 66 surrounded by Nexus security forces. Black SUVs blocked the street, men in tactical gear secured the perimeter. No police presence, further confirmation that Reynolds operated outside normal law enforcement channels. She needed to move quickly. Once they discovered the tunnel, they would expand their search. The Softail was still parked behind the bar, too conspicuous and now inaccessible. Her emergency cache, containing cash, a prepaid phone, and identification documents, was hidden in a storage unit across town. Elena slipped through back alleys and residential yards, avoiding main streets where Reynolds's men might be patrolling. 30 years of living in Pine Ridge had made her intimate with every shortcut and hidden path. The town might have grown, but its bones remained familiar. 20 minutes of careful movement brought her to Manny's Diner, a Pine Ridge institution nearly as old as Route 66 itself. The breakfast rush was in full swing, providing the perfect cover of normalcy. She entered casually, nodding to familiar faces, and made her way to the back, where a payphone, a rarity in the digital age, still hung on the wall. She dialed the emergency number. Bill had insisted they all memorize a secure line that would route through multiple exchanges before connecting. 3 rings, then a click. "Verify," came the gruff response, Ray's voice tense but steady. "Broken Arrow," Elena replied, using their agreed-upon distress code. "Location: Manny's back booth. Need extraction. 10 minutes. Blue pickup honked twice." The line went dead. Elena ordered coffee and toast. She had no intention of eating, positioning herself to watch both the entrance and the side window overlooking the parking lot. The normalcy of the diner, the clatter of plates, the murmur of conversation, the smell of bacon and coffee seemed surreal after the violence she had just escaped. Customers chatted about weather and local gossip, unaware that less than a mile away, armed men had just assaulted a local business. 9 minutes later, a battered blue Ford F-150 pulled into the lot and honked twice. Elena left cash on the table and exited through the side door, slipping into the passenger seat in one fluid motion. Behind the wheel sat not Ray, but Michael, his expression grim. "Are you hurt?" he asked as he pulled away, driving exactly at the speed limit to avoid attention. "I'm fine. They breached the bar, but I got out through Jack's tunnel." Elena scanned the streets as they drove alert for pursuit. "Any word from Bill or Veen?" "Bill's gone to ground at his hunting cabin. Ray—" Michael hesitated. "Ray's dead, Elena." The words struck like physical blows. "What? How?" "They hit his place before coming for you. Professional job made to look like a home invasion gone wrong. I was too late to warn him." Michael's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I found him, called it in anonymously, to ensure a proper investigation, then came for you." Elena stared straight ahead, processing this new loss. Ray, who had flown with Jack in Vietnam, who had been at their wedding, who had helped her renovate the bar, was gone. Another casualty in a war that had spanned decades. "They're eliminating anyone who might expose them," Michael continued, turning onto the highway leading out of town. "Bill's flash drive must have spooked Reynolds badly. He's accelerating his timeline, cutting losses, destroying evidence." "Where are we going?" "Safe house about 50 miles north. Off-grid cabin I've maintained for contingencies." Michael checked the mirrors constantly, ever vigilant. "We'll regroup, contact Bill, figure out our next move." Elena nodded her grief for Ray, transforming into renewed determination. "The flash drive. If Bill's contact got it to the FBI, why haven't they moved on Reynolds yet? Bureaucracy, verification, jurisdictional issues. Or maybe Reynolds has people inside the bureau too. His network runs deep." Michael took an unexpected turn onto a dirt road, the pickup's suspension protesting. "We can't count on official channels moving quickly enough. Not when Reynolds is clearly willing to eliminate everyone connected to our investigation." The implications hung between them unspoken, but clear. They were on their own, outgunned and outmanned, against an adversary with seemingly limitless resources and reach. The odds were overwhelming. Yet, as the landscape shifted from suburban sprawl to open desert, Elena felt a strange calm settling over her. For 32 years, she had lived in limbo, neither fully accepting Jack's death nor actively seeking the truth behind it. Now, finally, she was doing what should have been done decades ago, confronting the man responsible and demanding justice. If that pursuit cost her everything, her business, her home, perhaps even her life, so be it. Some prices were worth paying. "Tell me about this safe house," she said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. Michael seemed relieved by the practical question. "Former ranger station abandoned in the 90s. I bought it through shell companies, renovated it off the books. Solar power, well water fully stocked with supplies. Defensive perimeter with early warning systems. No paper trail connecting it to me." "Sounds like you've been preparing for this scenario for a while." "Afghanistan taught me to always have an exit strategy. When I started investigating Reynolds, I knew the risks." "And why did you start investigating?" Elena asked, studying his profile. "You mentioned your brother, but there's more to it, isn't there?" Michael was silent for several moments, navigating the increasingly rough terrain. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of painful memory. "My brother wasn't just killed, he was made an example of. The official report said insurgent attack, but his body showed signs of interrogation. Torture. Reynolds wanted to know who else knew about the shipments, who my brother had talked to." He took a deep breath. including me. Your brother had contacted you, Michael nodded. Email heavily encrypted. Said he'd discovered something big illegal shipments using military transport, protected by high-level officials. Wanted advice on how to proceed. I told him to gather evidence, document everything, then go through proper channels. A muscle twitched in his jaw. 3 days later, he was dead. And Reynolds came after you, too. They tried. Hit team disguised as home invaders, just like with Ray. Difference was, I was expecting them. 2 died in my living room. The 3rd talked before he bled out, gave me Reynolds's name confirmation of what I already suspected. Elena absorbed this, seeing Michael in a new light. Not just a determined investigator, but a man marked for death who had turned the tables on his would-be killers. A man who, like her, had lost someone to Reynolds's ruthless pragmatism. So this isn't just about justice for you either, she observed. Justice, revenge at some point, the distinction blurs. Michael glanced at her briefly. But I'm not consumed by it. I want Reynolds exposed and punished according to law. I want his entire network dismantled. I want the truth to come out about all the lives he's destroyed. That's justice of a kind, isn't it? Elena thought of Jack, his unfailing belief in doing what was right, his commitment to honor and duty, even when the system he served failed to uphold those same values. It's what Jack would have wanted, she said softly. Truth and accountability, not just vengeance. The truck crested a rise, revealing a panoramic vista of Arizona's high desert rugged mountains. In the distance, vast expanses of scrubland dotted with saguaro cacti and mesquite. The landscape seemed eternal, indifferent to human struggles. Elena found comfort in that perspective. Whatever happened in the coming days, the desert would endure unchanged. We'll get there, Michael promised, perhaps reading her thoughts. One way or another. As they descended into a canyon that would shield them from aerial surveillance, Elena watched Pine Ridge disappear in the side mirror. The town where she had spent most of her life, built a business, created a community. She had no illusion that she would ever return to the life she had known. That chapter had ended the moment Reynolds's men breached her door. But perhaps, if they succeeded, she could begin a new chapter. One where Jack's death was understood for what it was, where Reynolds faced consequences for his crimes, where the truth finally emerged after decades of concealment. It wasn't the future she had imagined for herself, but it was a purpose worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. And as the desert enveloped them in its ancient silence, Elena Walsh made peace with that possibility. Michael's safe house proved to be more fortress than cabin. Nestled against a cliff face that provided natural protection, on one side the structure was built from reinforced concrete, disguised with local stone. Solar panels on the roof powered essential systems, while a natural spring provided water. The surrounding terrain offered clear sight lines in all approachable directions, making surprise assault nearly impossible. Inside the space was sparse but functional. A main room combining kitchen and living areas, 2 small bedrooms, a bathroom with actual plumbing, and a secure communications center hidden behind a false wall. Supplies were meticulously organized, non-perishable food, medical equipment, weapons, ammunition, and survival gear. Afghanistan habits, Michael explained, noting Elena's assessment of the preparations. You learn to plan for the worst-case scenario. And what's your worst-case scenario here? She asked, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. Reynolds sends a kill team. We're discovered. Resources run out. Take your pick. He shrugged. The point isn't to live here forever, just long enough to execute our contingency plan. Which is? Michael led her to the communications room, where multiple monitors displayed surveillance feeds from the perimeter. A secure laptop sat on the desk, currently running decryption software on a set of files. These are copies of everything Catherine gave you, retrieved from Bill's contact before he took the originals to the FBI. I've been working to verify the data cross-reference with my own research, build an airtight case. To what end if we can't trust the FBI? We can't trust the local office or normal channels, Michael corrected. But I have contacts in the Department of Justice people above Reynolds's pay grade, outside his network of influence. Once we've verified everything and combined it with our own evidence, we'll bypass standard procedures and take it directly to them. Elena considered this. How long?
Another day, maybe 2. The encryption is sophisticated, military grade.
Reynolds won't give us that much time. Not now that he's shown his hand with the assault on the bar. Michael nodded grimly. I know. That's where Bill comes in. He's running interference, feeding misinformation through back channels suggesting we've fled to Mexico. Should buy us some breathing room. And if it doesn't? Michael's gaze shifted to the weapons locker visible through the open door. Then we defend this position until extraction. My DOJ contact has agreed to send a team once we have the evidence compiled, people they trust absolutely. Elena wasn't convinced. In her experience, absolute trust was rare in any organization, especially government agencies with competing interests and agendas. But she recognized the necessity of having faith in someone beyond themselves. What can I do to help? She asked, practical as always. Rest, Michael said firmly. You've been through hell today. Take the east bedroom. I'll monitor communications and continue processing the data. Elena wanted to object, to insist on participating, to push forward immediately, but exhaustion suddenly swept over her like a physical weight. The adrenaline that had carried her through the assault, escape, and journey was ebbing, leaving bone-deep fatigue in its wake. 4 hours, she conceded. Then I want a full briefing on everything we know. Michael agreed, and Elena retreated to the small bedroom. Despite her intention to merely rest briefly, she fell into a deep sleep. Almost immediately, her body demanding recovery from the morning's trauma. Dreams came, vivid, intense visions of Jack. Not memories, but something stranger. Jack as he would be now, aged by the decades they had lost, standing beside her at Route 66. Jack in the desert, pointing toward the mountains, urging her forward. Jack's voice clear as reality. It was never about the bar, Ellie. It was about doing what's right, no matter the cost. She woke disoriented, the quality of light through the small window suggesting late afternoon. Nearly 6 hours had passed. Elena rose quickly, annoyed at herself for exceeding her intended rest, and made her way back to the main room. It was empty. Michael, she called, moving toward the communications room. Also empty, the monitors, showing only the peaceful desert landscape surrounding the safe house. No sign of disturbance or struggle. Michael's truck was still visible on the external camera, parked where they had left it. A flutter of unease passed through her. She checked the weapons locker, still secured, contents undisturbed. The front door was locked from the inside. Nothing suggested forced entry or violence. On the kitchen counter, she found a note in Michael's precise handwriting, receiving signal from secondary drop site. Gone to investigate. Back by sunset. Security protocols active. No one should approach. Armed response authorized. M. Elena checked her watch, 2 hours until sunset. She debated briefly whether to attempt communication, but if Michael was conducting covert reconnaissance, an unexpected transmission could compromise his position. Better to wait and maintain the security of their base. She used the time productively, familiarizing herself with the safe house's defensive capabilities and reviewing the files Michael had already decrypted. The evidence was damning: financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies linked to Ascendant Properties and Nexus Security. Shipping manifests with discrepancies that aligned perfectly with suspected drug movements. Communications between Reynolds and various military and government contacts using coded language that barely disguised their illicit activities. Most disturbing were personnel records, former military and intelligence operatives now working for Nexus, many with questionable backgrounds, and a list of resolved incidents antiseptic, bureaucratic language masking what were clearly assassinations, including Jack's. The file contained the true report of his death, not a helicopter accident, but a terminated threat with extreme prejudice. Reading the cold clinical description of her husband's murder nearly 3 decades after the fact, Elena felt a strange disconnection. The grief that had defined her life for so long was still present, but transformed, crystallized into something harder and more focused. Not a weight to be carried, but a weapon to be wielded. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in bloody hues, anxiety began to gnaw at her. Michael should have returned by now, or at least made contact. The satellite phone he had left remained silent. Outside, shadows lengthened across the canyon, turning familiar shapes into potential threats. Elena checked and rechecked the security monitors, finding nothing amiss. She positioned herself near the front window, Colt in hand, maintaining sight lines while staying hidden from external view. The discipline Jack had instilled in her, always vigilant, always prepared, served her well now. Full darkness fell. No sign of Michael. At 8 o'clock, headlights appeared on the dirt track leading to the safe house. A vehicle approaching, slowly navigating the rough terrain with care. Not Michael's pickup, but a black SUV identical to those Reynolds' men had used during the assault on Route 66. Elena's muscles tensed, combat instincts engaging. She moved to the security console and activated exterior floodlights, instantly illuminating the approaching vehicle. Through high-powered binoculars, she could make out a single occupant, female, not male. Not Michael, not Reynolds' tactical team. Catherine Mercer. The SUV stopped at the outer perimeter, respecting the boundary. Catherine emerged slowly, hands visible, clearly aware she was being observed. She made no aggressive movements, simply stood beside her vehicle, waiting. Elena faced a critical decision. Catherine had provided the flash drive that confirmed Reynolds' operation, but her sudden appearance at a supposedly secure location raised serious questions. How had she found them? Why come alone? Could this be a trap? Catherine serving as bait, while Reynolds' men prepared to strike from hidden positions. Keeping the Colt ready, Elena activated the exterior speaker system. That's far enough? Identify your purpose. Catherine didn't flinch at the disembodied voice. I need to speak with you. It's about Michael Cooper. How did you find this location? Michael gave me the coordinates as an emergency backup. He said if anything happened to him, I should come here directly. Catherine remained calm, her posture non-threatening. Please, Mrs. Walsh, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't urgent. Elena weighed her options. The fact that Catherine knew the location was troubling. Either Michael had trusted her far more than he'd indicated, or she had obtained the information through other means. Neither scenario was reassuring. Still, if Catherine had wanted to lead an assault team to their position, that team would already be visible on the thermal imaging scanners. The woman appeared to be alone, genuinely seeking contact. Place any weapons on the hood of your vehicle, Elena instructed. Then walk forward slowly. Stop at the marker. Catherine complied, removing a small pistol from her purse and placing it on the SUV's hood, before walking to the red stake marking the inner perimeter. Elena activated additional floodlights, eliminating any shadows where threats might hide, and conducted a thorough scan of the surrounding area. Nothing. Maintaining caution. Elena unlocked the reinforced door and emerged with the Colt held at low ready, not pointed directly at Catherine, but prepared to respond instantly to any threat. Where is Michael? She demanded without preamble. Catherine's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine distress beneath. Reynolds has him. He was captured this morning, attempting to make contact with a federal agent. They're holding him at a Nexus facility outside Tucson. How do you know this? Because I was there. Catherine met Elena's gaze directly. I've been working with the FBI for the past 6 months, gathering evidence against my husband and Reynolds. Michael was meeting my handler when Nexus Security intercepted them. The agent was killed. Michael was taken alive for questioning. Elena's grip tightened on the Colt. Convenient timing. Right when we have the evidence to expose everything. Not convenient, deliberate. There's a mole in the FBI office. Someone tipped Reynolds about the meeting. Catherine took a careful step forward. Mrs. Walsh, Elena, I understand your suspicion. But Michael trusted me enough to give me this location. And right now, he needs our help before Reynolds decides he's outlived his usefulness. Why should I believe you? This could be an elaborate trap to capture the last loose end in Reynolds's operation. Because I have nothing left to lose. Catherine's voice carried the weight of painful truth. My husband is a criminal who's built his fortune on addiction and death. My entire life has been a lie. The only redemption I can hope for is helping to bring down the organization I unwittingly supported for years. She reached slowly into her pocket and withdrew a small device. This is a tactical tracker. It shows Michael's current location transmitted from a subdermal implant he had installed years ago, insurance for precisely this situation. Elena didn't lower her weapon. If Reynolds is as thorough as you claim, wouldn't he have scanned for tracking devices? Standard scanners wouldn't detect this. It's experimental technology developed for high-value intelligence assets operating in hostile territory. The implant mimics natural tissue until activated by a specific biometric response, in this case, Michael's elevated heart rate under stress. The explanation was plausible, but Elena remained wary. And you expect us to launch a rescue operation based on this? Just the two of us against a Nexus security facility. Not just us. Catherine glanced back toward the darkness beyond the floodlights. I've contacted others who have reason to want Reynolds exposed. People Michael and Bill trusted. On cue, a second vehicle emerged from the shadows, a weathered Jeep containing two figures Elena recognized immediately. Bill Hernandez, looking grimmer than she had ever seen him, and a younger man in military fatigues who bore a striking resemblance to Michael. Captain Tyler Jenkins, Catherine explained, the logistics officer from Fort Huachuca who noticed irregularities in shipping manifests, and Michael's cousin. When he learned of Michael's capture, he made his choice. Bill exited the Jeep and approached his experienced eyes, scanning the surroundings before focusing on Elena. It's legitimate, he confirmed. I've verified Catherine's story and credentials. She's been working with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, building a case against Reynolds and Mercer for months. And the safe house location, Elena pressed. Michael told me, Bill admitted. Insurance policy. If something happened to him, I was to contact Catherine and bring her here. She has access to resources we need. Elena's suspicion remained, but the presence of Bill, a man she had trusted for decades, tipped the scales. She lowered the Colt slightly. You mentioned a Nexus facility. What exactly are we talking about? Former black site repurposed as a private security training center, Catherine replied. Isolated, self-contained, heavily guarded, but not impenetrable. And Michael is definitely there. Catherine held out the tracker. See for yourself. Elena accepted the device cautiously. The small screen showed a pulsing red dot located approximately 40 miles southeast of their current position in an area she knew to be remote desert terrain near the Mexican border. The signal was steady, unwavering. Reynolds will question him, Catherine continued. Extract whatever information he can about our operation, our evidence, our contacts. Then eliminate him just like the others. How long do we have? 24 hours at most. Reynolds is accelerating his timeline, liquidating assets, destroying evidence, preparing to relocate his entire operation. Michael's information has an expiration date. Elena made her decision. If this was a trap, she was walking into it with eyes open. If it wasn't, if Michael truly was being held captive, then she couldn't abandon him to Reynolds's mercies. "Let's move inside," she said, gesturing toward the safe house. "We need to plan this properly. One shot, all or nothing." As the small group gathered around the table in the main room, maps and satellite imagery spread before them, Elena felt a strange sense of rightness. This was it, the culmination of 32 years of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. One way or another, her long-delayed reckoning with Reynolds would finally come to pass. The odds were overwhelming, the risks extreme. But as Jack had taught her long ago, sometimes the only way forward was through the fire. The Nexus security training facility appeared deceptively ordinary from a distance, a cluster of low buildings surrounded by fencing nestled in the remote desert landscape far from curious eyes. Only closer inspection revealed the military-grade security measures, motion sensors, infrared cameras, armed patrols, reinforced access points. Less visible, but equally formidable, were the electronic countermeasures, signal jammers, drone detection systems, and a private communications network isolated from external infrastructure. From their observation point on a ridge half a mile away, Elena studied the compound through high-powered binoculars. Bill beside her, his experienced eyes noting defensive positions and patrol patterns. 3 entry points, he murmured. Main gate to the north secondary access, east emergency exit, south. All heavily monitored. Guard rotation, every 30 minutes. 2-man teams overlapping coverage. No blind spots in their perimeter surveillance. Elena shifted her focus to the central building, a concrete structure larger than the others, with minimal windows and multiple satellite dishes on its roof. According to Catherine, this housed both the command center and the enhanced interrogation facilities where Michael was likely being held. "Frontal assault would be suicide," Bill continued. "Even with Jenkins's military credentials, getting us past the outer checkpoint, we'd never reach the central building before the alarm was raised." "We're not going in the front door," Elena replied, lowering the binoculars. "We're going under it." Bill raised an eyebrow. "Underground access." Catherine's intelligence indicates the facility was built over an abandoned mining operation from the 1940s. Most shafts were sealed during construction, but one remains accessible through a drainage culvert half a mile east of the perimeter. It emerges in a maintenance area beneath the main building. Tight quarters, limited mobility potential for ambush. Bill noted the former Marine assessing tactical considerations. But also unexpected, they'll be watching the perimeter and access points, not the floor beneath their feet. Elena nodded. Catherine and Jenkins will create a diversion at the main gate, something requiring Reynolds's personal attention. While security focuses on them, we infiltrate through the mining shaft, locate Michael, and extract him through the same route. And Reynolds? Not our primary objective. Michael's extraction comes first. Bill studied her face, reading the truth behind her words. "But if the opportunity presents itself, then I'll take it," Elena acknowledged. "Reynolds answers for Jack and every other life he's destroyed, but not at the expense of the mission." The distinction was important to Bill, to herself, and to Jack's memory. This wasn't about vengeance at any cost. It was about justice and rescue, about completing what Jack had started 3 decades earlier. If that completion included Reynolds facing consequences, so much the better. But she wouldn't sacrifice Michael's life for personal retribution. They retreated to their temporary base, a canyon 2 miles from the Nexus facility, where Catherine Jenkins and their equipment waited. The plan took shape over the next few hours. Timing, coordinated roles, assigned contingencies developed. Catherine provided security protocols and facility layouts. Jenkins contributed military expertise and equipment from Fort Huachuca's supplies. Bill mapped the infiltration route through the mining tunnels. Elena prepared herself mentally and physically, cleaning Jack's Colt with practiced precision, checking and rechecking her gear. The weight of the mission settled on her shoulders not as a burden, but as a purpose, finally recognized and embraced. As dusk approached, Catherine joined her outside the makeshift camp, the desert sunset painting both women in golden light. "May I ask you something personal?" Catherine's voice was quiet, respectful of Elena's preparation ritual. Elena nodded, continuing to assemble her equipment. "After all these years, what kept you going?" "Knowing your husband had been killed, suspecting it wasn't an accident, but never having confirmation, how did you find the strength to continue?" Elena considered the question, her hands moving automatically through familiar motions. "I built the bar Jack had dreamed of. I created something that honored his memory every day. It wasn't about finding answers anymore, it was about making his death mean something. And now, when it's all over, whether we succeed or fail, what then?" "I haven't thought that far ahead," Elena admitted. "For 32 years I've been Jack's widow, keeping his dream alive. I'm not sure who Elena Walsh is beyond that." Catherine nodded in understanding. "I face a similar question. 25 years married to a criminal building a life on blood money. Who am I without that identity, however false it proved to be?" The two women regarded each other with newfound recognition, both having lived lives shaped by men's decisions, both now choosing to forge their own paths forward, whatever the cost. "Perhaps," Catherine suggested, "we'll both have the chance to discover the answer." Elena secured the final piece of her equipment, a communications device that would allow the team to stay connected despite Nexus's jamming technology. "First, we have to survive the night." "We will," Catherine said with quiet confidence. "Reynolds believes himself untouchable because he's eliminated every threat for 30 years. That arrogance is his weakness." "And ours?" Elena asked. Catherine's gaze was steady. "Underestimating how far he'll go to protect his empire. Reynolds has contingency plans for his contingency plans. He survived this long by anticipating every possible threat." "Not every threat," Elena corrected. "He never anticipated a widow's persistence, or that his own wife would turn against him." "The invisible women," Catherine acknowledged with a grim smile. "The ones powerful men forget to fear." As darkness settled over the desert, the team made final preparations. Weapons were checked, communications tested, timelines confirmed. Elena felt a strange calm descend the clarity that comes with absolute commitment. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, she had found her way back to the path Jack had tried to walk 3 decades earlier, standing against corruption, whatever the personal cost. Under a sky brilliant with stars, the 4 unlikely allies set their plan in motion. The mining tunnel was exactly as Catherine's intelligence had indicated, narrow, partially collapsed in sections, but navigable with care. Elena led the way, her compact frame better suited to the tight confines than Bill's larger build. Decades of maintaining Route 66 had given her an intimate familiarity with crawl spaces and structural challenges that served her well now. They moved in silence, guided by subdued red light that preserved their night vision without creating telltale illumination. Above them, Catherine and Jenkins would be approaching the main gate, creating the diversion that would draw attention away from their infiltration. The tunnel air hung heavy with dust and the metallic scent of mineral deposits. In places, support beams groaned, ominously weakened by decades of neglect. But the path remained clear, trending steadily upward toward the Nexus facility foundation. After 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a rusted grate sealing the tunnel entrance to the building above. Through it, Elena could see a dimly lit maintenance room, pipes, electrical panels, ventilation equipment. Vacant as expected during the night shift. "Ready," Bill whispered, positioning himself to provide covering fire if necessary. Elena nodded, applying the compact cutting tool Jenkins had provided to the ancient lock, securing the grate. The specialized blade sliced through corroded metal with minimal noise, creating an opening just large enough to slip through. She emerged first, scanning the space for surveillance devices or motion detectors. Finding none, She signaled Bill to follow. According to Catherine's intelligence, the maintenance level operated on a separate security system from the main facility designed for utilities management rather than prisoner containment. Diversion begins in 3 minutes, Bill noted, checking his watch. We move on the signal. Elena oriented herself using the facility schematic they had memorized. The interrogation rooms would be 2 levels up in the building's secure core. Between their current position and that objective lay multiple security checkpoints, armed guards, and electronic surveillance systems. Her earpiece crackled softly. Catherine's voice tense but controlled. Approaching main gate now. Guards responding as expected. Stand by. Through the thin walls, Elena heard a distant alarm, brief, then silenced. Security responding to the gate, not a facility-wide alert. Perfect. Movement on all external cameras, Catherine continued. Reynolds notified. He's en route to the security office. Now. That was their signal. Elena and Bill moved swiftly from the maintenance room into the adjacent utility corridor. As predicted, the lower level was minimally staffed during night hours, skeleton crew focused on essential systems. They encountered a lone technician near the elevator bank, his surprise evident as he registered their unauthorized presence. Before he could react, Bill moved with the silent efficiency of his Marine training, a precise strike, rendering the man unconscious without permanent injury. They secured him with zip ties and communications blackout gear, hiding him in a supply closet where he would remain undiscovered until their mission concluded one way or another. The central elevator required security credentials they didn't possess. Instead, they accessed the emergency stairwell. Using the master key, Catherine had provided one of many security vulnerabilities she had documented during her months of gathering intelligence on her husband's operation. As they climbed, Elena maintained situational awareness alert for any sign their presence had been detected. Above them, the diversion continued, Catherine and Jenkins demanding to speak with facility management about an alleged breach of federal regulations, creating just enough procedural confusion to keep security focused outward rather than inward. The interrogation level, when they reached it, was clinically austere. Polished concrete floors, reinforced doors with electronic locks, surveillance cameras covering every angle. 2 guards patrolled the central corridor, their movements suggesting routine rather than heightened alert. Elena and Bill withdrew into the shadow of the stairwell, assessing options. Direct confrontation would trigger alarms. Stealth approach was compromised by the open layout and comprehensive surveillance. Plan B. Bill whispered, reaching into his pack for the device Jenkins had provided, a localized EMP emitter designed to temporarily disable electronic systems without triggering facility-wide fail-safes. Elena nodded in agreement. The power disruption would affect security doors, surveillance, and communications, giving them approximately 3 minutes to locate Michael and begin extraction before backup systems engaged. Bill activated the device. A soft pulse emanated outward, and instantly the corridor lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency illumination. The electronic locks disengaged with audible clicks. Surveillance cameras powered down. The guards reacted immediately, drawing weapons and activating radio communications that no longer functioned. Before they could establish the nature of the disruption, Elena and Bill moved swift, coordinated, decisive. Non-lethal takedowns executed with precision born of experience and desperation. Within 30 seconds, both guards were incapacitated, secured, and relieved of their access credentials. The corridor lay open before them. 5 doors, Elena noted, scanning the interrogation rooms. Which one? Bill examined the security panel, now operating on minimal power. Room 3 shows occupied status. They moved quickly to the designated door. Using the guard's credentials, Elena overrode the emergency lockdown. The door slid open, revealing a scene that seared itself instantly into her memory. Michael Cooper sat secured to a metal chair, his face bearing evidence of enhanced interrogation, cuts, bruises, electrical burn marks. But his eyes, when they lifted to identify the interruption, remained defiant, alert, alive. Standing over him, a metal tool in hand, was Marcus Reynolds. The man who had ordered Jack's death 32 years earlier turned slowly, his expression shifting from irritation at the interruption to genuine surprise as he registered Elena's presence. Recognition dawned in his cold eyes, not of her face, which he had seen only once at Jack's memorial service, but of the situation's implications. "Mrs. Walsh," he said, his voice as controlled and professional as it had been during their phone conversation. "This is an unexpected development." Elena leveled Jack's Colt at Reynolds's chest, her aim unwavering despite the adrenaline surging through her system. "Step away from him, now." Reynolds assessed the tactical situation with the calculated precision of a man who had navigated countless dangerous scenarios. He noted Bill covering the doorway, the incapacitated guards, the disabled security systems. His own weapon lay on a table 3 feet away, accessible, but not without exposing himself to Elena's fire. "This is quite impressive," he acknowledged, setting down the tool and raising his hands slightly. "Infiltrating a secure facility, neutralizing my security, creating a masterful diversion at the main gate. All to rescue Mr. Cooper here, who has proven remarkably resistant to persuasion despite our best efforts." "I won't tell you again," Elena warned. "Step away." Reynolds complied, moving with deliberate slowness away from Michael. "You realize, of course, that you cannot possibly escape." This facility houses 27 security personnel, all heavily armed and trained in containment protocols. The temporary systems disruption, clever though it is, will end in approximately 90 seconds. At that point, automatic lockdown procedures will seal all exits. While he spoke, Bill moved to Michael, quickly assessing his injuries while working to release the restraints. "Can you walk?" Bill asked quietly. Michael nodded, though pain flashed across his features as circulation returned to his limbs. "Been waiting for you," he managed through split lips. "Knew you'd come." Elena maintained her focus on Reynolds, recognizing his verbal maneuvering for what it was, an attempt to delay them until reinforcements arrived. "We're leaving now. You're coming with us." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "A hostage situation? I wouldn't have expected such a cliché from you, Mrs. Walsh. Taking me would only complicate your escape. The smart play is to leave immediately while you still can." "This isn't about smart plays," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the emotions roiling beneath her composed exterior. "This is about justice, for Jack and everyone else you've murdered to protect your operation." Understanding dawned in Reynolds's eyes. "Ah, so this is personal vendetta, not just a rescue mission. You've carried this grudge for 32 years, waiting for your moment." "Not waiting," Elena corrected. "Living, building something meaningful from what you destroyed. But now, it's time to finish what Jack started, exposing you for what you really are." A small smile touched Reynolds's lips. "And what am I exactly?" "A patriot who served his country through 3 wars. A businessman who recognized opportunity. A realist navigating a complex world where official policy and operational necessity rarely align. A drug trafficker," Elena stated flatly. "A murderer. A man who sacrificed others for profit and power." Reynolds shrugged slightly. "Simplistic labels for complicated realities. Your husband misunderstood the nature of Operation Mirage, just as you misunderstand my current activities. Some truths are classified for good reason, Mrs. Walsh. Some operations serve greater purposes than individuals can comprehend." "Save the national security justifications," Bill interrupted, having freed Michael and helped him to his feet. "We've seen the evidence. The shell companies, the financial transfers, the shipping manifests. This isn't about classified operations. It's about using military resources to move drugs for profit." 60 seconds to system restart," Michael warned, his voice weak but determined. Elena made her decision. We're leaving. You're facing Justice Reynolds, either through legal channels or right here, right now. Your choice. Reynolds studied her, the unwavering aim of Jack's Colt, the absolute conviction in her stance. He had encountered many adversaries over his long career, but few had penetrated his defenses so completely or confronted him with such righteous purpose. "You won't shoot an unarmed man," he said, though uncertainty flickered briefly across his features. "Not in cold blood. Jack wouldn't have wanted that." "You don't get to speak his name," Elena replied, her finger tightening slightly on the trigger. "You don't get to tell me what he would have wanted. You took that right when you ordered his death." Time seemed to compress as they stood facing each other, the widow seeking justice, and the man who had created her status 3 decades earlier. Around them, the emergency lights flickered, indicating imminent system restoration. "We need to move," Bill urged. "Now or never." In that moment of divided attention, Reynolds made his play, lunging toward the table where his weapon lay. Elena tracked the movement, Jack's training guiding her response. The Colt barked once, the sound deafening in the confined space. Reynolds stumbled, clutching his shoulder, where Elena's bullet had struck a precision shot that incapacitated without killing. He collapsed against the table, genuine shock registering on his face. For a man accustomed to controlling every situation, being outmaneuvered was perhaps more painful than the physical wound. "That's for Jack," Elena said quietly. "He would have made the same shot stop the threat without becoming what he fought against." The emergency lights stabilized as auxiliary power engaged. Alarms began to sound throughout the facility, containment protocols, activating security teams, mobilizing. 45 seconds to full lockdown," Michael warned, leaning heavily on Bill for support. Elena secured Reynolds with his own restraints, ignoring his pained protests. "You're coming with us. Your testimony, your records, your entire operation, it all goes public. The truth finally comes out." They moved swiftly back to the stairwell, Reynolds stumbling between them, Bill supporting Michael, while Elena maintained security. The facility had awakened around them, voices shouting orders, boots pounding on floors, above and below, the mechanical sound of security doors engaging. Their extraction route, the mining tunnel, remained their best option, but reaching it would require navigating a facility now on high alert. The odds were overwhelming, the margin for error non-existent. Yet as they descended toward the maintenance level, Elena felt a strange sense of completion. Whether they escaped or not, she had confronted Jack's killer, had forced him to face consequences after decades of impunity. The evidence Catherine had gathered would eventually reach authorities, exposing the entire operation. Reynolds's empire would fall even if she wasn't there to witness its collapse. As they reached the maintenance level, gunfire erupted from the corridor ahead, Nexus security forces converging on their position. Bill pushed Michael into a protective alcove, returning fire with controlled bursts that forced their pursuers to take cover. Alternative route. Elena decided, pulling Reynolds toward a ventilation access panel Catherine had identified in her facility schematics. This connects to the drainage system that feeds into the mining tunnels. The panel yielded to forced entry, revealing a narrow shaft barely wide enough for human passage. Elena secured a zip line to a structural support, creating a controlled descent path. "You first," she ordered Reynolds, whose shoulder wound had left him pale but functional. "Any resistance, any attempt to alert your people, and the next shot won't be so careful." Reynolds assessed his options and found them limited. With reluctant compliance, he maneuvered into the shaft and began the descent. Michael followed his injuries, making the process slow and painful. "You next," Bill told Elena. "I'll cover our withdrawal." Elena recognized the tactical logic, but hesitated, unwilling to leave Bill exposed. "Together or not at all?" she insisted. A sad smile touched the older man's weathered face. "Some missions require rear-guard action, Elena. Jack would understand that." Before she could argue further, the security team advanced, forcing Bill to return fire. With practiced precision, he activated their final contingency, a series of flashbang grenades rigged to create a cascading distraction. "Go!" he shouted above the detonations. "Complete the mission!" Elena recognized the resolve in her old friend's eyes, the same determination she had seen in Vietnam veterans who understood sacrifice as part of duty. With a silent nod of acknowledgement and gratitude, she entered the shaft, beginning her descent, even as Bill's covering fire continued above. The ventilation shaft opened into a larger drainage culvert, where Michael and Reynolds waited, an unlikely pair, the torturer and his victim now equally dependent on Elena for escape. She secured Reynolds more thoroughly, ensuring he could move, but not resist or flee. "Bill," Michael asked, reading her expression. "Covering our withdrawal." Elena replied, the words carrying all the weight such phrases held for military personnel. Michael nodded in understanding grief and respect in his battered face. "Then we make it count." They navigated the drainage system by the dim light of emergency flashlights, the sounds of pursuit growing distant behind them. The route was challenging, narrow passages, standing water structural deterioration, but passable with determination. After what seemed an eternity of tense movement, they reached the mining tunnel junction. From here, the path led directly to their extraction point, where Catherine and Jenkins would be waiting with transportation, assuming the diversion at the main gate hadn't resulted in their capture. "Almost there," Elena encouraged Michael, whose strength was flagging despite his remarkable endurance. Reynolds followed in sullen silence, his wound professionally field-dressed with supplies from their emergency kit, his expression unreadable in the dim light. The tunnel widened slightly as they approached the exit, offering the first hint of night air flowing from the desert beyond. Elena allowed herself a moment of cautious hope. Against overwhelming odds, they had penetrated a secure facility, rescued Michael, captured Reynolds, and were within reach of extraction. Bill's sacrifice, if that was indeed the outcome, would not be in vain. The moment shattered as lights suddenly flooded the tunnel entrance. Powerful beams cutting through darkness, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of weapons being trained on their position. "Federal agents," a commanding voice announced. "Lower your weapons and identify yourselves." Elena's heart sank. After everything to be captured now so close to completion, it seemed a cruel twist of fate. But as her eyes adjusted to the harsh illumination, she realized something unexpected. These weren't Nexus security forces. The tactical team securing the tunnel entrance wore FBI insignia, their approach disciplined and professional rather than mercenary. From behind the agents emerged a familiar figure, Catherine Mercer, accompanied by an older man in a suit, who carried himself with the unmistakable authority of senior law enforcement. "Stand down," Catherine called to the agents. "They're with us." The tactical team lowered their weapons slightly, but maintained readiness. The man in the suit stepped forward, studying Elena, Michael, and their prisoner with careful assessment. "Assistant Director Warren, FBI," he introduced himself. "Mrs. Mercer has been working with our public corruption unit for the past 6 months, building a case against Nexus Security and Ascendant Properties." His gaze settled on Reynolds. "I see you've expedited our arrest warrant, Mr. Reynolds." Reynolds glared at Catherine with cold fury. "You were the leak all along, my own wife." "I was the conscience you never had," Catherine replied quietly. "Someone had to stop what you and James were doing." Warren turned to Elena. "Mrs. Walsh, I presume, we have some serious legal questions about your unauthorized entry into a private facility and the apparent abduction of Mr. Reynolds. However, given the extraordinary circumstances and the evidence Mrs. Mercer has provided, those issues can be addressed with appropriate context." "Bill Hernandez is still inside," Elena said, prioritizing her friend's safety above legal consequences. "Former Marine assisting our extraction. He needs immediate support." Warren nodded to his tactical team leader, who immediately dispatched a squad toward the facility. "We have the building surrounded. Nexus personnel are being detained and processed as we speak. Michael, barely conscious now that the immediate danger had passed, managed a weak smile. Told you I had contacts in justice. The revelation struck Elena like a physical blow. This was planned. The entire operation. Not your part, Michael admitted. That was improvised heroism. But yes, Catherine has been working with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit since she discovered James's connection to drug trafficking. I was their inside man, verifying intelligence, identifying key players. And your capture? Elena asked, the pieces realigning in her understanding. Calculated risk. We knew Reynolds would personally oversee my interrogation. His ego wouldn't allow delegation. It placed him exactly where we needed him when the FBI made their move. You might have mentioned this before I shot him, Elena noted dryly. Michael's split lips curved in a pained smile. Some aspects of the plan were flexible. As FBI medical personnel moved in to attend to Michael, and with less urgency to Reynolds, Elena stood apart, processing the culmination of 32 years of uncertainty and unresolved grief. Justice for Jack was finally at hand, not through her personal vengeance, but through the system he had believed in and died trying to protect. Reynolds would face prosecution for his crimes. The evidence Catherine had gathered, combined with Bill's documentation and Michael's testimony, would ensure conviction. The drug trafficking network that had operated with impunity for decades would be dismantled. The truth about Jack's death and countless others would finally emerge. Yet as she watched Reynolds being led away in handcuffs, Elena felt not triumph, but a strange, quiet peace. The wound that had defined her life for so long hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from raw, bleeding anguish to a healed scar, permanent, but no longer debilitating. Mrs. Walsh, Catherine approached, respect evident in her bearing. The assistant director would like to take your formal statement, but it can wait until tomorrow. For now, there's someone who wants to see you. She gestured toward a medical transport vehicle where a familiar figure sat receiving treatment for what appeared to be superficial wounds. Bill Hernandez, battered, exhausted, but very much alive. He made it out through an emergency exit, Catherine explained. Encountered our perimeter team during their approach. His information helped coordinate the final assault on the facility. Elena moved toward her old friend, emotions too complex for words rising within her. As their eyes met across the distance, a silent understanding passed between them. The recognition of promises kept missions completed, loyalty honored. The desert night wrapped around them, FBI teams securing the area, medical personnel attending to the wounded, justice beginning its slow, methodical process. Above, stars gleamed with eternal indifference to human struggles, just as they had the night Jack died, the night Elena began her journey as a widow, the night Reynolds first believed he had escaped consequences. As dawn light touched the eastern horizon, Elena Walsh stood facing a future she had never anticipated, one where the defining quest of her adult life had reached resolution. Route 66 was gone, destroyed in Reynolds' assault. Her home, her business, her daily purpose, all would need to be rebuilt or reimagined. Yet, for the first time in 32 years, she faced that uncertainty not as Jack's widow maintaining his legacy, but as herself, a woman who had faced overwhelming odds, made difficult choices, and emerged with her integrity intact. Whatever came next would be her own chapter to write. And as the new day broke over the Arizona desert, Elena Walsh was ready to begin.